Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School Committee on July 19th. If everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And would everybody please remain standing for a moment of silence for one of our former students, J.P. Dwyer, who was, he's also the son of Duval's school teacher, Kathy Dwyer, and his granddad used to be town moderator in Whitman. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I had stated at a previous meeting, that we will have a public comment. Public comment will only last about 15 minutes. Anybody who would like to speak, you have a maximum of 3 minutes. So is there anybody here for a public comment? No? Okay. Thank you. We'll have approval of meeting minutes next. The first is May 10th, 2023.
Motion to accept as presented.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. The approval of meeting minutes for May 30th, 2023.
Motion to accept as presented.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please? Okay. And for June 7th, 2023.
Motion to accept as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we have moved up because, as I requested, when we have somebody coming to speak from the public, I asked them to go first because we don't have to have them sit through all the rest of the meeting. So I would like Chris Diorio, and if you have somebody else coming with you, Chris.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Christopher Diorio, and I'm here as the president and director of Whitman Pride. Whitman Pride was created to increase LGBTQ visibility in Whitman and to raise awareness and funds for organizations that provide community programs, advocacy, and activities for LGBTQ youth. We know that LGBTQ people and their allies exist in all corners of the community, but they may feel alone or unrepresented. Our mission is to help them show that Whitman is a place of acceptance, inclusion, and acceptance and love. Before coming here today, I made a point to look at the mission statement for the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District. And part of that Whitman-Hanson mission indicates that the public schools are committed to maintaining a safe, respectful, and supportive working and learning environment in which all students and employees can thrive and succeed. It goes further into discussing the core values of the Whitman-Hanson school community, and it says that you support an inclusive environment that makes all decisions in the best interests of students, that is committed to providing a safe, secure, and healthy environment, and to model responsible citizenship based on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Whitman Pride is here today asking to be a partner with the schools in fostering and furthering your mission, because your mission coincides with ours. The ask in collaborating with your mission to act in the best interest of your student body, specifically LGBTQ students, and to provide a safe environment for them and to be a good model for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We propose the following 3 items. First, Whitman Pride would provide rainbow progressive pride crosswalks. Not legal, state-mandated, crosswalks, but simply progressive pride colored walkways here at the high school and at Whitman Middle School. Secondly, we are offering to create a Whitman Pride Scholarship to be offered to a graduating Whitman-Hanson Regional High School senior who has exhibited efforts toward advocacy or strength in the LGBTQ arena. And third, we would offer to be partners with the library here and libraries through all of our Whitman-Hanson schools to provide age-appropriate educational materials for students at all levels to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically as it relates to the LGBTQ community. Why is this important? Because this community, specifically the young people in the LGBTQ community, are under active attack in this country. Over 500 separate pieces of legislation have been filed throughout the country, specifically attacking LGBTQ individuals. Over 220 of them attacking trans students, children. 70 of them have already been approved by individual states, banning medically necessary gender-affirming care for trans students, banning trans students from participating in sports and sporting activities, and even limiting bathroom access to those people conforming to their person's gender. We are not here to advance an agenda. We're here to try to save lives. That's really what's important here. The statistics bear this out. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people between the ages of 10 and 24. And LGBTQ students are at a significantly increased risk in this group of people who have actually committed suicide. They are 4 times as likely than their counterparts, to attempt suicide. The Trevor Project in the 2022 National Survey found that 45% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, and 21% of those who considered it actually attempted it. That specifically goes against the norm over the course of heteronormative individuals at that age, which is at 8%. Still an abomination that 8% of students between the age of 10 and 24 are considering suicide. But when you add these numbers up, it shows that these kids are at a great disadvantage. Transgender and non-binary youth face elevated risks for depression, thoughts of suicide, and attempting suicide, and a peer-reviewed study said that they are 2.5 times more likely to experience medically necessary depressive symptoms, suicide, and suicidal ideation. How is this happening? Why is this happening? One of the reasons is rejection and lack of social support and affirming spaces. Research suggests that among LGBTQ youth, only 1/3 experience any kind of acceptance, even within their own families. 1/3 of those don't disclose their identity at all for fear of what might happen. And the remaining 1/3 are discriminated against or harassed or in other ways excised or exiled from their family units. Another study finds that LGBTQ youth finding this high level of parental rejection are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide. These same youth in these same studies report that a lack of access to affirming spaces is a tremendous generating cause of this depression and these suicidal attempts. Only 55% of reporting LGBTQ youth report that their schools are affirming, and only 35% say that their home life is affirming. Fewer than 1 in 3 trans and non-binary kids found their home to be gender affirming. The protective factors that we are looking for in simply putting colors on a patch of ground. The studies have also shown that social support and acceptance from adults and educational institutions goes a long way towards preventing these issues from going forward further. Having at least one accepting adult in a child's life can reduce the risk of suicidal attempts among LGBTQ people by 40%. A peer-reviewed study in 2021 shows that transgender and non-binary youth who report gender identity acceptance from adults and peers, especially teachers and educational mentors, specifically and significantly lowers the odds of suicidal attempts. LGBTQ youth who feel high social support from families and from educational institutions attempt suicide at less than half the rate. And if they live in a community that is accepting of LGBTQ people, they report significantly lower rates of depression among those students. Affirming spaces is a major issue. The Trevor Project recently found that LGBTQ youth who found that their school and home is LGBTQ affirming reports much lower rates of these attempted suicidal problems. These people who report the presence of trusted adults in school have higher levels of self-esteem and access to supportive peers. And policies and practices such as simply recognizing these students for who they are and accepting them for who they are results in great change. Over 72% who had previously reported suicidal ideation, when asked again, when placed in affirmative places and affirming places, report that those suicidal ideations have diminished or are no longer existent. The fact is this: symbols matter. Perhaps a crosswalk, perhaps hanging a flag in a classroom or from a pole, perhaps a scholarship to strive for, isn't for everybody. I get that. It's okay. It does speak volumes, however, to the people to whom it is important. When students, especially members of your LGBTQ community here in our schools, both at the high school, the middle school, and below, see that rainbow color, they can finally, in that brief moment, feel like the place that they go to school and the community in which they live accepts them for who they are. These colors are not for everybody, but they are to let the teenager who's insecure and unsure of how safe it is to be who they are, to know that the community and school that they work and live in actually cares about them. It's for the little kid who's on the playground who gets bullied to know that school is a safe place when they walk across those colors. It's to let neighbors with trans kids know that others in this community and others in this educational institution are trying to be accepting of the people that they are trying to become. They are for folks who live in a world where we still have to worry about folks legislating away their future rights to work, to raise children, to get an education, to get married, and even to exist. I'm asking simply to place colors on the ground and to promote educational institutions and educational success here in the high school. That is what Whitman Pride is proposing. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, before I go to the rest of the board, I hope as you walked in, you looked up as you came into the building.
I did.
And there is the nice respect sign, and there's inclusion sign, which to me is very important, and those were done by the students themselves. And I think that's very important, an important thing for all of us to remember. And if you look around the library, there's a couple of Pride books out that they are hopefully trying to do their best as we have. I know that personally, being a teacher in the district, having dealt with some students like this, I will admit I treated them differently, but not in the way you think. I treated them differently by when I know that they were trans or maybe going to be, and they were walking alone in the corridor. I would stop them and ask them how their day was and how they're doing and how they were feeling. And I know one student who in middle school, then I would see at different games up here at the high school, would always come up to me, works at a different place here right in Whitman, would always make sure she was at the window when I would come, and asked to be friends with me on Facebook. So I find it very important that each and every one of us think about that before we have our discussion. Okay, yes, Fred.
To start off, thank you for your presentation. I agree with what you're saying, probably 90-something%. I believe that for this committee to pass a resolution or a proclamation that we are an inclusive school district would be a good thing. I would think that we could adjust our mission statement to specifically include the LBG community so that it's right there in the mission statement so that these kids will know we are an accepting school district. I believe we have, so it's my impression, counselors and people in place to provide that adult educational assistance, and I'll refer that to the superintendent, so that they know it's okay, they have someone to talk to, they have that adult within the schools. Okay? We're in a different world. We have to be inclusive, and we should be inclusive. I agree wholeheartedly. The one part that I worry about, and I said this at our Board of Selectmen's meeting, and perhaps I didn't articulate myself as clear as I wanted, is that by putting a symbol on the ground, and if we can end up having that discretion to say yes to one group, what happens when another group comes and says, we want our symbol there? And it may be a group that we don't agree with or that is very repulsive, such as Nazis. What happens if we say no? Okay. Well, what happened in Boston when they wanted to fly the Christian flag, the people that were denied took it to court. The judge said, no, Boston was okay. They have the right to do that. They appealed. The appellate court affirmed Boston's decision. And then it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did overturn that. But my big fear is, who pays those legal expenses in order to protect doing what we feel is the right thing? And that could run, I mean, I can only imagine what that bill was for the city of Boston. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a possibility. I agree we need to be inclusive. And we could probably do a few things to even show that we're more inclusive. That is my one fear when it comes to putting something on the ground, that someone else is going to want to do it. And
If I can take off my Whitman Pride hat and put on my constitutional law professor hat, this is a common mistake. The difference is large. Shurtleff, the case that we're discussing in the city of Boston, dealt with an existing policy that the city of Boston had that was not followed. They had never rejected anybody based on their written policy for flags going up the third pole. They had never rejected someone. This was the first time they did it. And the Supreme Court in Shurtleff said that because the policy was not followed, because there was a content determination made by the city of Boston that contradicted their stated policy, that therefore they were operating in violation of said policy. And now we have a series of folks, now if they need to have a policy or want to have a policy, they can. What's different here, when you as an elected body make a determination, is the principle of what's called government speech. You are permitted as a government entity to speak as you choose, no different than any individual. You have the right to say what you wish. There's a concurrent doctrine called the compelled speech doctrine. You can't be made to speak something that you don't want to. As a person, you can't make me believe in something. You can't make me affirm something that I don't believe. That is contrary to the First Amendment. The same principle applies to government organizations. You, as a government entity, can choose to speak on an issue and make a statement, similar to what the Board of Selectmen did in June. You also cannot be compelled to say something that you don't want to say. So, if another group came in, if the Klan comes in, if Nazis come in, if the flying spaghetti monster comes in and wants to put something on the ground, you, as an entity, can simply say no, because you can't be compelled to put out a message that you don't wish to speak. You can choose to say as much or as little as you wish, but you also cannot be compelled to say anything beyond what you want to.
Can I just ask a question? Mr. DiOrio, thank you for your presentation. You are not asking to fly a flag.
No,
what
not
I'm
yet.
seeing right now is a scholarship, which I think would be beneficial to my student body. Support for education our students, age appropriate.
Absolutely.
and then a crosswalk. You're not talking about a flag at all.
No.
Apples and oranges. Because I think that was a conversation piece that was discussed prior to that in our country, in our Commonwealth right now is a hot button issue, the flag. And what pole it goes on. You are not asking that.
No.
So I just want to clarify to the public out there that these are 3 asks: a sidewalk at Whitman Middle School and at the high school, painted by your organization,
Whitman Pride would cover all costs and do all the work.
a scholarship for a student, graduating senior, and assistance with our librarian, we only have one, in putting age-appropriate materials out that are screened by us with you to assist us. And with our professionals, Mr. Small, we have many professionals, pre-K to 12, to assist students all across the board, to make sure we have age-appropriate educational materials. That's the ask.
1, 2, and 3, yes.
Thank you.
Dawn?
Thank you. There is a saying, nothing for us without us. So I have a question, maybe administration could respond, or you could. In the spirit of communication and listening to our student voices, which is what we're probably going to talk about later tonight about our strategic plan, hearing students. We do have a club already in place. That is the Rainbow Alliance, GSA, Gender and Sexuality Alliance. I actually thought it was Gender and Straight Alliance. I thought it was a combination, but I'm looking on our website at the clubs and activities flyer, so I just became educated myself. Gender and Sexuality Alliance, run by Wendy Price, Allison Seiden. They meet, the times, and so forth. So that group is in place. I don't know how active they are.
Very.
My question would be that we embrace them and certainly include them. That I support Mr. Diorio's efforts coming forward. However, I would not want a citizen in the community to be dictating how a message or a symbol is put on school campus without their input. And I would also mention in regards to flags and banners, because we do have some banners on the building. You know, maybe students would want to see a banner rather tthan a flag. Where is the crosswalk placed and painted and so forth? As far as flags go, I actually wonder if Dr. Jones placed a flag hanging in the stairwell right over there, if there would be no question whatsoever, because for those of us who have been in Hanson Middle School, there are a variety of flags in that foyer. I've been on a tour in that building. There are a number of them, and I don't know that any of those have come before school committee before. So I just add that comment. So if you wouldn't mind sharing anything in regards to the GSA club at the high school and including them.
In working with other Pride organizations on the South Shore, Hingham and Weymouth and Situate, the 3 that I'm very specifically involved with professionally, all 3 of those organizations, upon getting approval from the school or the town, went through and had the GSA students actually come out and work with the local Pride organizations to do the work. We would suggest the same thing, and in fact embrace it. Many hands make light work. There's 10 stripes to put on the ground. Let's get a bunch, let's get a bunch of extra brushes and get it done.
Thank you.
Okay, who else?
I guess that was my question. If you know, if there are other communities, I know Hingham has the crosswalk, Situate, Weymouth.
And North Quincy has one. Quincy has one as well. Cohasset has one on their campus. We're surrounded by communities that have done this either through the town themselves or through the school committee. And in Weymouth, actually, the effort was done with the assistance of the Weymouth Pride Project, but the offer was done by the student group. So.
Go ahead, Howard, continue.
So it's not the asks here, and I'm sort of echoing Jeff and Beth. You know, as a classroom teacher, I teach seniors. I read college essays. I read a lot of college essays about students who, when they were young, the struggles that they had, the things they went through, and then suddenly at one point, whether it was seeing a crosswalk or a teacher who has a sticker in their classroom, they felt like they belonged. Statistically, if students in the LGBTQ community walk into a place and they see a symbol that is inviting, it helps. It de-stresses them. I can't separate my career from these asks because I see it every day in the students in my classroom, and there are so many students that are going through things that we don't know. To me, all of these things are absolutely harmless. They are inclusive. I think a scholarship is wonderful. Who are we to turn down a scholarship that's going to help students? Giving students education, I just wonder if that would be paired with the wellness along with the library, because there is new wellness curriculum that has just been proposed and they're working through that. I think that we're seeing this progressiveness and this inclusivity, and I'm looking at our strategic plan, which I know is later, but the equity and diversity statement in the strategic plan reads, the school district strives to provide an inclusive environment for students, employees, and families by respecting the race, ethnicity, national origin, languages, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, religion, ability, family composition, and socioeconomic status of each community member. It's right there in our strategic plan. It doesn't say, race, gender. It says gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. I think we need to, it's one thing to have it in writing, but it's another thing to have your actions support your words. And I think that that's really what this is about here. So.
And I'd like to ask Nikki, would you come on up? And she's in charge of equity at the school. So I think she can provide us with some information about what we do now, maybe.
Behind the mic.
Yeah, pull the mic down.
And pull it down.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
Okay, Nicole Seamus-Schneeweis, I'm the Director of Equity and MTSS for the district, so thank you for recognizing me. I was going to point out the equity statement, which we will be voting on subsequently, but just to highlight that, I also wanted to talk about the fact that Massachusetts is the only state that has a Safe Schools initiative, so that there is precedence to support our LGBTQ plus students in the school setting. So I just wanted to highlight that. We have already done an LGBTQ plus equity series with our teachers. So I know we have some allyship here amongst the teachers and students at the high school and the middle schools for this, in support of this initiative. So, thank you.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, Steve.
Just going back to pillars, one of them is safe schools. How would we want it any other way? I've spoken to a group earlier this week. I have them raise their hands who's been bullied before. I've got the nice teacher from who teaches in East Bridgewater, who lives right across the street with 3 wonderful sons who I see bouncing around. That's an absolute joy. Let's help them figure out their futures. Let's help them figure out what's going on right now. I have nothing against this. I do hear folks saying, well, there's a couple colors that, if you want to say, lead to the dark side. And Mr. DiOrio, I'm sure with all your knowledge, you probably know what I'm talking about, and you probably can say, Steve, let me give you a few pointers and some of the truth. And I'm more than open to hear that. I also said to the same group, my oldest niece, I brag about all the time. Her kid, she keeps them off of Facebook. I'd say she has 2. Number 2 is not here yet. He's due in September. But I say I have 2. Her son, Julian, is just a little over 1. She works at the Carver Public Library. And I asked her about this after the selectmen's meeting. And she said, Uncle, why not? And those 3 words just, they really resonated with me. And they'll never go away. And there are, I think I said 15 the other night at a different group meeting, but I think there's about 20 of us that are the core of my family. And that's who I look out for and look for guidance. We're not here just to educate this coming school year or the next one. We're here to help plan the future. I've got some excellent breaks. I got bullied too, but I've had student government. You probably all know Boyce sat on student government, of course. You hear it in his voice. One thing I do want to note, Nikki, in the last version of snippets for us in the school district. And by the way, and I'm not calling out Mr. Farrow about this right now, but we did have 2 versions of snippet number 19. I think we have to fix the numbering on that.
You're the first person, you win the prize. Something that I did on purpose.
That's why we're the best of friends. In those, what Nikki had written was all the resources for Pride, for LGBTQ+. And it's already a normal mainstay in this environment. Yeah, let's not harass and make inconvenient for kids. If you need to beat someone up, beat up me, but I'm still going to enjoy the neighbors next door and the neighbors across the street. And really, that's it. So thanks for being here tonight, folks.
Yes, Fred.
I just want to follow up with a couple things and then reiterate something. Do we have the right to paint at the high school anything on the Hanson property, because it's in the town of Hanson, without it going through their board of selectmen?
That I don't know, but what I can say is the school committee is in charge of the school and property as a whole.
But we don't own it, we lease it.
The high school, well, if you want to go that way, it's a 60-40 split in Whitman for the high school.
I'm sorry?
It's a 60-40 split for the high school, because the high school is on Hanson property, but it's leased, like it's the front. I mean, depending on where you want to go, I could paint a sidewalk on the Whitman side. If you want to go that way, because that's the football field. You know what I mean? But I don't know that question, but I think as the governing body of the regional school district, that is you can do specifically in your buildings, on your property, this is school district property. I can check with the attorney after the fact, depending on which way you want to go, but my gut says you can do what you want on this property.
We painted the rock.
We painted the rock.
Right, right, true.
I would like to see us come out of this meeting with perhaps defining our mission statement to make sure that we actively say the LGBTQ community is welcome, where we don't identify those words. Maybe it's adding a sentence. I know we haven't done our mission statement for a long time.
It's up next, so I think that's part of it.
I would like to see us come out with that. I believe in making strong statements and making sure we have the proper support in place. I feel the way I feel about painting.
Yes.
I'm sorry, just one more thing,
Yes,
Beth.
sir.
I want to make a motion that we accept the proposal of Mr. DiOrio in regards to Whitman Pride and partnering with us.
Second.
Okay. We have a vote on the floor, motion on the floor. All right. So that has been seconded. Yes.
Question. Are we taking the 3 questions in order, or are we taking everything all in
Steve
one?
proposed for all. So he proposed all. So that's what the vote will be, on all.
I'd like the record to reflect 2 and 3 I'm okay with.
Okay.
And I'm okay with us proclaiming and changing our mission statement and making sure that every student knows that we're inclusive. I stopped short at paint.
That's not a motion.
All right. David? You're
So
speaking to the...
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This isn't a social issue. I don't think it's a political one. It's frankly a civil rights issue. And I want to take the time to thank Chris, because it isn't just today that he's been at this. He's been doing this for years, and he's made a lot of progress. And to see him the other day watching that stream at a town meeting and seeing the conversations that took place, I think it was revealing of people's characters, maybe a couple Freudian slips here and there. But I think what was great was the goal and the conversations that we have begun to have that we haven't really had these last couple of years. And I don't think any statement is worthwhile unless there's actions to back it up. And I think this is a great opportunity for us as a community, for us as a district to back it up. I've noticed members of our community who have been or are a part of the LGBTQ community that have been in positions of power have been attacked because of their sexuality, or at least in part. And I don't believe that is exactly something we should be supporting or endorsing. And I think not pointing out that behavior or not doing anything to rectify those actions makes us complacent. So I think this is a great opportunity to show respect, to take that initiative and move forward with what we learned. And to Dawn's point regarding GSA, I think that's great. I think that'd be perfect with the educational report where we could follow up and have these dialogues to truly understand what they're facing, what is the circumstances that they deal with every day. Because as far as I'm concerned, we can paint a crosswalk, we can put a flag up, but what good is it if there's nothing to back it up? If they see a rainbow and they walk into an environment that makes them feel awful and makes them want to die, then what good is seeing it walking up to that building every day? So we need to be proactive. And I want to thank Nikki too for MTSS. I mean, it's been really night and day the last year or so. It's been a lot of great actions going forward, and I think this is a great way to build upon that progress. So I do ask you guys to support this tonight. And Chris, again, thank you again for doing this. Thank you again for coming out, and I especially appreciate you taking that time to put on your lawyer hat to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor.
Wait, we still have questions on the, on the motion, yes.
All right, everything is, I got an education just in a few moments, it was a very great presentation, very good presentation. I just, when I heard about this, I asked myself, is there a precedent here? Have we ever accepted an outside, you're just a citizen, correct? To come to us and say, I want to change the appearance of the school. I want to add a permanent piece of something I believe into the school. And I love all the reasons you want to do this, I agree with. I'm not anti anything. I'm pro freedom and pro children. That's about it. Live your life. I do me, you do you. That's how I live my life. But so if there isn't a precedent, we're setting one tonight.
So just to answer that, we've had Eagle Scout projects every year
that are still here today,
that are all over the district.
Okay, so that's good. There's a precedent.
Walls, everything like that.
Because that
are approved by school committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and they go.
That answers that. So then I'll go to the second part. So if there is a precedent, I feel like this needs to be fair and equal. And so if our Jewish students want to paint the Star of David, are we going to allow that?
Can't do that.
But you can't do that?
Well,
but you can do this.
really-
Like, I don't get all that. Okay.
That's religion.
Okay,
So that's a little bit,
In the statement that you read, something about equality.
Accepting students.
accepting students.
I have two sons in the Army. If
Yep.
they want to paint, the symbol of the United States Army on the side of the school, are we going to do that?
That would be up to you guys.
That would be up to
So
us.
we will vote on those things if they come.
Yes.
But by doing this, we're opening the door for those things to come,
Well,
I
we've
guess.
already opened the door.
Okay.
We
And-
have, if you go to like the Conley School,
Yeah.
there was a whole area of the playground that was done by Eagle Scout. Am I correct on that one?
Okay.
Yes, because when we did the tour, we were given
Yeah,
that.
so it would be on a
and
basis.
it's around the other things there.
Incident by incident basis.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's your job.
All right.
Yep.
I guess.
No, I think you raise a good point. The precedent piece, we have allowed, when you talk about a permanent fixture,
Yep.
we've allowed people to put memorials.
Yep.
Sometimes. Before me, people have put memorials up.
Okay.
So it has been, through
I
the
have
past
one.
10 or
Deserve
so
one.
years,
No, it's not me.
it's
Okay.
been an Eagle Scout project to
Yeah.
better the district, or
Okay.
put something permanent to help them achieve their goal.
Yeah.
And we've accepted that. So there has been precedent in that. And I go to that with the other students, and that might be an opportunity for other student groups
To come forward.
Sure.
And that was where I
and
wanted
put
to go with
some
that.
things. So-
Because we need to be fair and equal.
Absolutely.
If we're going to support this, we also have to support, our Christian students. And if they want to do something, we have to let them come here and present it to us, because if we're not fair and equal, then we're intolerant, and I think that's the last thing we want to be is intolerant.
Okay, Stephen?
Hi, I'm just going to make an educated guess that the displays that maybe the Boy Scouts or other organizations displayed are in general promoting certain characters that we all have, qualities of individuals that we should all try to attain or aspire to. So they're most likely they're generalized statements of these qualities. A pride symbol is a preference. You're displaying a preference, whereas, say, heterosexual, there's no display of a preference. Any type of and it's a sexual preference, which doesn't need to be displayed in a public institution. I mean, if a woman approached you, Chris, and said, hey, could we spend some time and get some lunch, then she would find out about your preference. It shouldn't have to go farther than that. It doesn't have to be displayed. Each individual can address their own preference in their own personal way. I don't believe you can display it personally, but not in a public setting or an educational facility where it just doesn't need to be. It's a personal issue. Again, we all need affirmation. Every child needs affirmation, and we should seek to in every opportunity, and even seeing a child alone, coming alongside, how's your day going? Would you like to talk anything? There are ways we can do it every day, even with strangers. That's something as human beings we should all be doing. But personally, I think there's and again, I don't think LGBT should be included. Every sentence or paragraph I read says inclusivity or diverse. I see it too much. It makes me think, what are we all, a bunch of bigots or racists? It's just put in our face. Can't we look at an individual as a quality of an individual, a kind individual, a responsible individual? Affirmative action is gone because it's wrong. We should be addressing individuals as individuals. When you display a preference, it does cause animosity to those who are not like that. They think that now someone else is being elevated above them. There's a time and a place for it. I just don't believe it should be, you can display it on your car, it's your private property. But again, I'm not in a school facility or something like that.
If I could address first, when you're talking about a preference, this is not something that people choose. This is an identity. It's not who, given the current climate in this country or around the world regarding how people in the LGBT community are treated or mistreated in these particular circumstances, would choose or prefer to be that. They wouldn't, but they are who they are. It is their identity. And to the first thing you stated, that goes directly towards it. These other projects that deal with certain general notions of character, this symbol would also represent an item of character, that this institution is inclusive of those individuals, that we accept and not just tolerate. Tolerate implies a notion of superiority. I don't like the word tolerance because it means, at least in my perspective, I have some power, I'm going to let you do what you do. But I can take that back at a moment's notice. This is not something that people prefer. It is who they are. And it's a statement from this body that we accept and embrace this type of inclusion for these people.
Ms. Donovan, I'm not going to accept any comments from the floor, okay? I've stated that before. This is a school committee discussion. So, David, did you have a response? I saw your
Yeah, just a
hand
couple
up.
of things. I'm just recollecting everything in my head. So just responding to Glenn real quick, you made a great point in regards to the military, and I think it's worth acknowledging what we're doing over at Duval School. And I don't know if this was Dr. Foley's idea, but I found it to be a fantastic idea where during, I believe it was around Memorial Day, where students were taking flags and they were placing it at the front of the building to represent, veterans or people they have lost that was served in the military. The point of that, though, is not it's just acknowledging their service, but it also gives the students the opportunity to bond with one another with similar shared experiences. And I think that's something that's lost, where they can understand that they're not alone. And I think that's a great point when it comes to what Mr. DiOrio is trying to do today, because one, it's not a preference. Nobody wakes up and decides what their sexuality is going to be. People don't wake up and decide what their racial identity is going to be. And the thing is, why we go out of our way to acknowledge these groups is because they're underrepresented and they're mistreated because they don't have that support. They don't have that advocacy. So by showing that we do care and that we do support them and give them the mentorship, the groups, the leadership that they need, that you are reducing the risk of suicide. But then there's the other point in regards to the Supreme Court. I've never woken up any day and really worried if my rights were going to be taken away, if my bodily autonomy was going to be taken from me, if my right to marry was going to be taken from me. But there is people who wake up and have that thought process who don't know if their rights are going to be stripped from them and if the legislation or legislators are going to stand up and fight for them. They have no clue. So yeah, I believe in my role, in my capacity as a local official, I believe I do need to stand up for them because they are a part of our community and we need people to stand up and fight for them because if we don't, who will? And thank you again, Chris, because if we didn't have you here tonight, we wouldn't be having these conversations. It's year 4 for me. We have not really spoken like this ever. And I'm glad we are because now we can start having these conversations, bringing them to the forefront, and most importantly, bringing these people in who are experiencing these discussions that we're having and hearing their perspectives so we can learn and then advocate and support them and figure out what is going on to help alleviate and mitigate these issues. So, and then hopefully there is less suicide risk and there is less mental health issues and there is more support within the district and people feel more comfortable who they are in the skin that they have in their own identity and hopefully they can reach their potential to their fullest. So I do think it's quite important. I think that gets lost amongst a lot of people is that it's not just LGBTQ, it's people who are frankly, people who are not white men. I mean, that's really what we don't want to say here, is that you have people who are either minorities or underrepresented group are being mistreated, and people overlook it for years. Nobody batted an eye, at the Ball School when we have Multicultural Day and everyone's doing Irish tap dancing, I guess the point is that, yeah, this group has not been acknowledged and there hasn't been support, and we should be doing something about it and not just painting on the crosswalk or putting a flag up or whatever we do from there. It's not just an aesthetic thing. We need actual action steps put in place. So I think this is a great way to start the dialogue, and I ask everyone tonight to support this. And I hope people listening tonight at least know and understand that we're here and that we're trying and that there's people that here that care and that are listening, and we're going to do what we can to help better your
Something new, Fred?
Yes, in response to Mr. Ford.
Okay.
What, if anything, does this change about how we do things within our district right now? As we were discussing.
He's asking you.
Okay,
so I'll let you answer.
As we were discussing in the superintendent answers, we have support in place.
We have mental health services that could be cut by next fiscal year. We don't do anything about it. So what are we going to do then? We have GSA. Yes, when has GSA ever been here? When do we have the student support? Up until last fiscal year when we had a student outreach coordinator put in place when we had students advocating behalf on what's going on in their experiences.
What is going to change in the day-to-day? We have professionals within our district. That was the first question I asked of the superintendent. Do we have professionals and support staff in district so that the students, as Mr. DiOrio had said, they need to have an adult, and a school is an important place for them to feel welcome and to know that they have somebody they can talk to and rely on. That, I believe, we have in place according to the superintendent and according to what Nikki has told us in the past or with some conversations. We have those supports in place. Could we do it a little bit better in trying to let the community know that we are inclusive and welcoming? Yes. We can do a better job with that. And I believe we,
you're right.
And I think we should try. Okay. That's
great. Then
but I don't want people to think that our district does not have systems and support in place right now, because we do.
Okay. I will recognize Mr. Farrow for this, because he's administration, so.
So, when you talk about belonging, or the sense of belonging or the lack of belonging, when we did our student surveys, there did come up, not alarming, but there did come up a sense that there are students who don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they belong at the elementary, at the levels they're at. They don't feel like a sense of strong belonging at the middle or at the high school. I don't know the sexual orientation of these students, but if there's a symbol or if there's a process or if there's something that can be adopted that would aid in the belonging of these students or give them a better sense that this is a safe place and they might belong, then I think that would highlight, that would be a highlight and a strength for them.
Okay, thank you. Glenn?
Mr. Dioro, am I saying that right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree with what you said about tolerance. That's a negative word. I do not like it. I don't think Steve meant, and then preference, I don't think Steve meant it as a choice. He just used that word because he was trying to describe it. But I have one more thing to add. It's, I'm all for acceptance, I'm all for support, I'm all for inclusion, and like I believe flags and banners, that handles that very well. And this is more about how this all will be perceived. Like, I was elected to this place, and I know how the people who voted for me feel about it. You know, that I've gotten emails, I've had phone conversations, I've had face-to-faces. So not everyone agrees that this is a good idea, and I'm wondering how it's going to be perceived, because once you go to a permanent fixture, something that's there forever, I feel like you may move from support, acceptance to promotion. And that, I don't want people to think that we're promoting a lifestyle, but it will have that appearance by putting it permanently on this school. It's just a fact. When I leave here, I'm going to get phone calls and I'm going to get emails and I'm going to get texts that say, "How'd you let that happen? How did that happen?" And so,
I would like to speak.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. I've also heard people saying, basically, it shouldn't be taught. Well, we're not teaching here.
Everyone
we
has
do
opinions.
not teach here. And I think the public needs to know that. We do not teach this in school. We don't teach you how to be gay. It's not taught here. Just like critical race theory, not out here. And people misunderstand, and
No
people
one's ever said that
and
to me.
hear the wrong things. It was, believe it, on Facebook, believe
Okay.
it or not, yeah. So, yeah, somebody put it out there. I just think that everybody needs to understand we're not promoting it. We're helping the children who are under-recognized. It's not a promotion. So I am saying that out there. So anybody who wants to say that we're promoting it, you're wrong. Do you think that kids are going to come out and say, "Oh yeah, well, I think I'll be gay because there's a rainbow out there"? They're not going to do that. That's not their choice, as Chris said. So I think we have to be careful of our words. And I think that's what's really important here. And I think we have to be careful of our actions and show that our actions support our words. And that's what's important.
I just want to say my comment was about perception.
Right. Oh, I know.
Okay.
I know. And that's why I'm trying to clear up some of that
Yes,
perception.
okay.
So I guess I'll speak to the perception first, but I mean, sometimes you're not going to be able to clear up that perception with people.
Oh, I
That's
know.
just how they're going to perceive things. And
Yeah.
I think, Glenn, you said it great. You do you, I'll do me, and that's how we need to go. And I think that couldn't be a better statement. We're talking about colors on a piece of pavement, for one. I think the other piece about inclusivity, and my kids, I live in Hanson, my kids go to Indian Head, and when you drive down Route 58, it says "Choose Kindness" on the sign outside the school. There are students who might hear things at home, who might see things on TV, particularly in the climates that we're in, and it's not doing something like this, all three of these things, not just crosswalks, has the potential to open the mind of a student who might have a closed mind at a young age. Closed-mindedness is a learned behavior and a taught behavior, but also opening the mind of a student can also be something that is learned. And being kind and inclusive as a student, that's the other piece of this, I think, that we're kind of missing. Like, we're focusing a lot on, oh my goodness, kids are going to see it and they're going to want to be gay, or, whatever. We all know. We've been sitting in here for the last 45 minutes. We know what's been going on. For me, as an educator, it's not my job, and I've said this in other meetings, it's not an educator's job to teach students what to think. It's to teach them to think. Just to think. Here's a scenario. You do you, right? But I want to go back to, there was a lot of statistics that were given to us. So, and I don't know if this is something for Nikki or for Jeff, but how many students do we have at the high school?
10,080.
Okay.
1080.
1,080 students.
Give or take.
How many counselors do we have at the high school?
I have 4.5 counselors and 3 adjustment counselors. So,
Okay, so 7.
7.4, yes.
So the ratio,
Okay, math, you put me on the spot.
right, I know.
130 to 1.
Okay, so that's 130 to 1. The likelihood of those 130 students making a connection with that counselor, I would guarantee, and I can say this as a high school teacher, there are students who do not have relationships with their counselors. They don't, right?
Yeah.
They walk in there, their September of their senior year, like, hey, let's start to figure out what I'm going to do, right? So that just having something outside the building to show students who might feel marginalized, might feel a certain way. You know, a lot of these students that we're talking about might not be willing to have these conversations with someone they've met in a senior seminar or junior seminar. So when we talk about counselors and we talk about the resources that we have, yeah, we have them, but the ratios, it's not as great as it appears. So
Okay, so I'm going to move the question. I think we've heard everything. I think, Fred, we've
She
heard.
brought up ratios, and I'd like to ask Mr. Dior a question.
You may ask him one
concerning
question,
ratios.
that's it, about racism. That's it.
What is the percentage of the LGBTQ community among adolescents?
In Massachusetts right now,
Sure.
625,000 people identified.
No. What's the percentage?
Percentage?
No, is it 3% of the population?
who are
Right now, it is approximately 10.4%, if I have my math correct, based on the population of the Commonwealth and the number of people we have.
Okay, so we're talking 100 and some odd students in the high school.
But that's students who are out, right? Those
That's
are students
just
who
those who have
identify.
stated that they
Correct.
are, and most studies will indicate that, very similar to other types of reporting statistics, that for every one person who reports, there are at least 1 or 2 who are still in the closet.
Thank you. Okay, so we are.
I'd like to make a motion to amend Mr. Boyce's original motion that each proposal from Whitman Pride get considered separately.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay. All right, so we're going to vote first on the amendment. No, there's no public comment after the 15 minutes, because we already had public comment, sorry.
Mind if I speak to that for a second?
Not really, Sean, because I didn't let Mrs. Donovan, so I really can't.
So I want to speak to that, actually, that issue.
Which issue is
The
that?
speaking, of not being allowed to speak, that issue.
Kind of point of the order is.
We've been to public comment.
What?
We have been to public comment.
Yeah, we had public
As you
comment
said.
at the beginning of the class, so. Now, you can speak to me generally later if you don't, but nope, sorry. This is a school committee meeting and not a discussion. Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor to take it. So first, we're going to vote on the amendment. Should we take each one individually? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those against? Okay,
I'm sorry.
It didn't matter, Steve. We lost.
okay. So we're going to take them on a whole.
So the original motion
The
stands.
original motion
Yep.
stands. So the motion is, the original motion, Steve, that you gave. And Jen, could you read that back, please? It's been a while.
Actually, hold on, I got one second.
You got to go way back, I know. Sorry.
While you're doing that, I'd like to thank all my former teachers and neighbors for coming out.
I want to support you on 2 and 3.
Dr. Krasanik, Mr. Trotter.
Please understand where my note comes from, of course.
Yeah. If you, I just want to make sure that everybody understands about,
It was just, well, 3.
well, we have to vote. I have to
I
say
get
what
it.
specifically
I-
it is.
for the
I don't
record.
want somebody coming back at me.
I'll eat a Starbucks while we wait.
Yeah, there you go.
It looks like a good dinner.
Yeah, all right, all right.
This is dinner.
That's dinner,
Okay,
right?
excuse me.
Dinner.
Make a motion, David seconded, to accept the proposition as proposed. I don't have a word for it.
Okay, so the proposition, as the request from Mr. Diorio and Pride, as is. Okay, so all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 3. So 5-3 is the score. Mr. Uriel, we thank you very much.
Paint away.
And we will be waiting for your information.
I'd like to make a motion that we commit to refining our mission statement and perhaps making a proclamation that the LGBTQ community is welcome in our educational facilities and we are a welcoming school. But we are committed to doing and changing that and getting that done.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about
We're going to talk about
the mission
that.
statement.
We're going to talk about the whole strategic plan, and I think that will be the opportune time to if you want to change the mission statement, take that at that point, because we're going to discuss that as a whole. But that's the motion that Fred has on the floor.
Okay, so how does should we take it two parts? You want to do just a proclamation?
Well, in other words, that we're making the commitment and then we can discuss it later when it's more appropriate. My motion is to make the commitment that we're going to do something.
Okay.
So we need a second.
Anybody second?
I didn't know what it was, but I'll second it.
That we're going to make sure, we're going to add wording.
Okay, I got you. That we're
LGBTQ
supporting.
community
Sure.
to our mission statement that we are a supporting school and we welcome and are supporting.
100%.
And perhaps do a proclamation at the same time.
Okay.
To go alongside that.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
And then discussion.
Okay,
I
discussion?
will take the assistant superintendent.
I'll take George, because he's the assistant superintendent.
I would just like to ask that before we take a motion to change something, we actually have a discussion. The strategic plan by which we're going to look at soon was crafted with care. There were 20 people involved. We asked the former school committee board if they wanted to be involved. They chose not to be directly involved. So what we did was we gave you notes on it every meeting we had. We then put these documents that we're going to look at tonight in all of your in the drive for the past 2 to 3 months. This started in December. So my ask would be is that before we look to change something, could we have the discussion as to why it is what it is and the reasons why? Thank you.
Is that okay with you, Fred?
Well, fine. I mean, I think that given the light of the circumstances and everything evolves and changes in days, weeks, or months, that some action should be done by our committee to speak strong. Okay. And perhaps it ends up being a proclamation, etc. But I think that we need to take some other action as well in the written format.
Yeah, I don't mind. I just wanted to make my statement, but we did use in our equity statement, which we did develop, it is written about gender expression, gender identity, and it is written about with the words that are used in what Massachusetts has given us as a protected state class, as a protected designated class.
Go ahead.
I'm not prepared to vote singularly on a mission statement. I prefer to vote on an entire strategic plan that incorporates a mission statement.
That incorporates that?
Yes.
Okay, so I haven't had a second yet.
You did have a second.
I did have a second. So, all right.
I mean, I'll withdraw the motion.
You want to withdraw?
How's that? I'll
And
withdraw the
you withdraw
motion.
the second?
Yeah, I withdraw.
Okay, so we'll discuss it
And we'll
during the
discuss it
strategic.
further.
Actually, the next thing.
Okay. But you wanted to...
I moved the strat plan up next because we have Kai.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to get the student out.
Oh, okay.
You know.
All right. All right, so we're also now going a little out of order. We're going to be talking about the strategic plan because we have a student here and we don't want to make them stay all night.
So in your packets, and I'll let some folks leave, in your packets, we have a draft of the strategic plan that was facilitated by our consultant group when we started this process in November of 2022. It's a 5-year draft of a strategic plan that George and Nikki kind of chaired, along with the 25 members of the committee, administrators, teachers in the building, students, parents, and subgroups within our school district. So I know you've had an opportunity to read through it. I know there's some questions around it. George, Nikki, and our student representative, Kai, is here to share the experience and then give you some thoughts on where we want to be within the next 5 years. George?
Sure. Thank you, folks. So in front of you, what you have are 2 documents, or what you were given it, and what you've had the ability to look at are 2 documents. One of them is the approximately 9 pages that talks about what the process was all about. You'll remember if you were on the committee last year that at the outset, we used Seaside Consultants. We used Dr. Kurt Bates, who's very familiar with this work, who worked with the DESI model that was developed on strategic planning. And for this year, we chose a 5-year strategic plan. What you have in this document is the process, who was involved, the timeline, and then what we came up with as far as key objectives and things of that nature. This is the part that we're giving you to say, this is how we did it. You will also see here under objectives, there are evidence of accomplishment. Those evidence of accomplishments that were given to us and presented to you folks are what needs to be turned into measurable strategic action steps for the coming years. They will not all be adopted now. Some of these may not be adopted. Those pieces of evidence were what our consulting company said we could have for look-fors if we accomplished the objectives. What the important pieces are the objectives, though, as we move forward in the next 5 years. What you also have is the brochure. The brochure is the public blast out. The brochure is what's going to be on the websites. The brochure is what's going to have copies in the buildings. The brochure is what's going to be representative of what it is that we do in the quick, easy, I can keep it with me type handout. The process planning and development is really for the committee themselves to talk about how it looked, what it was, and to move on from there. The next steps after we hopefully have some approval, discussion, however long it takes, would be for that. The strategic plan is adopted so that then the school department, and then with feedback from the school committee, we can develop our action steps for the year. Which, if you remember when we had a former chair and we had summer programming, I always said, could we sort of make those dovetail in the strategic plan that we had? Because remember, a strategic plan is the umbrella by which all other activities in the district take place. So we want to keep putting everything back into the strategic plan to see where it fits, so we have one guiding document for which we go forward. Nikki worked a lot on it, Makai was with us on it, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
So if you look on the shared drive, on this document, you'll see our timeline is in there on page 5. So this was quite an extensive process. It took us the year. We met as large group and we met as individual groups, and we had the opportunity to have 2 student representatives. We had a 9th grade and an 11th grade representative. Kai's our rising 12. And so I asked Kai to come tonight to kind of speak on his experience with being part of our team. So I'm going to turn it over to Kai, and then we'll get back to us.
That's great. From my experience, is this loud enough?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. From my experience, the one thing is the words and everything is written in this brochure isn't the words of just us or the people that were in the meeting. It's the words of the people under you, the teachers, the counselors, the students, everybody. Because we had to look at like assessments that people would say, what they thought about the school. And everybody either had some problem or some situation, so we have to look at how to solve this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. And we're looking at them all, and we have to like come to a conclusion that will make everybody happy, which is obviously very hard to do. I know some of you would know that. So that's why in this, I heard someone saying that LGBTQ isn't in the mission statement, but it's in the equity statement, because we saw that issue, and instead of putting LGBTQ over race or over religion or anything, we just summed them up and put them into one group. So they're all in the same thing and they're all given the same amount of attention and like care. Because within this is, we have to care for not just the students' diversity, but the teachers' diversity, which was another big issue within this, which is like students might have teachers that they don't feel comfortable with, because predominantly a lot of teachers, at least in the high school from my experience, are white, and there's not many teachers of any other race that I at least know of that are at least counselors. So we are looking to create an environment for the students, but to make the students happy, the teachers also need to be happy, and there's going to be teachers that can reflect on the students. Like with LGBTQ, with what you were saying, like I hate to bring it up so much because we just talked about it for so long, but the flag isn't only just to help this group of people, but it's to teach respect to the group so everybody cares for it. Like with the military, I grew up doing the pledge, and I see a lot of people fighting in the Army, and now I respect that because I grew up like seeing it, and seeing everybody else respect it makes me respect it. So I think more caring about the LGBTQ at a young age is even better than an old age, because at the point we're in high school, if you're still causing discrimination, you were just like, you're raised in a wrong way, but it can still change, but you already have your like predisposed thoughts and everything. And you said even like you just want the students to think. And that's why having like them at a young age and letting kids think about it, even see people of these different places, and like they aren't choosing this, this is what they are, is like great, especially at a young age. I have a little brother who's turning 3 in November, and this meeting, when he's in kindergarten, will be the last year of it. So I especially took care in thinking about it because he's going to be in this, and I want him to think of everybody as a human. That was my one goal with it. And then if there was any questions for me, since I was like a student looking on it, so I could give you the perspective from somebody in the school.
I just think it's wonderful that a student would get involved. Congratulate yourself, tap yourself on the back. The perspectives that you have and what you bring are very well thought out, and they're very well spoken, and personally I do want to thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Nice job, Kai.
Thanks, Kai.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, I just want to follow up with, I mean, I can't do it obviously as well as he did, but
You're right.
consistency, Fred, 20 years. So I also, when Kai talked about how we knew that everyone had a voice, so we did what was called a SWOT exercise with everyone in the district and stakeholder groups of parents, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And during that time, we compiled data, thousands and thousands and thousands of points of data. That data was then brought to our group of about 20 individuals, and which was representative of the district. And then it was talked about, chewed upon, put together in larger groups. Where can we succeed? Where can we move on? And from all of those data points, we came up with what are our objectives and what is it that we feel we need to work on, and what is it we feel that we need to improve upon. Not everything was, these are the 5 things that are bad that we have to fix. It was, these are the things that are prevalent, these are the things that we want to get out there, these are our big bucket items. You notice if you read the snippets, it's all buckets because that's what takes place. We put things in buckets and we try to move forward for a collective whole. So when we talk about then the objectives that you have, those are our focus areas. From there, we will develop individual action steps, and then we will develop those by September at the latest for you so that we can go back and forth, but they'll be put in the drive as we're doing the machinations of them. And then the goal would be is that if you're going to have school committee goals and or direct school committee thoughts and ideas to the superintendent's goals, then we would move forward from there. These would tie into Jeff and or the school committees, then they would tie into the individual schools, then they would tie into the individual teachers in their evaluations. So that is how the big umbrella is hopefully going to shake out.
You folks have had that opportunity to look and kind of digest this process. It's a 5-year. We traditionally in the district we've done 3. Under our admin, we were able to really accomplish the strat plan that was by the former administration, hit some of the pillars and accomplish those. Then we went into a 3-year plan through COVID, and we thought a well thought out plan for the next 5 years to bring me through to the end of my contract and hopefully to retirement. We could accomplish some of these in really achievable buckets. Things might change over the next 5 years. Who knows? But this is a framework for us to give direction to our principals. Then it trickles down into our teaching staff, like George says, like an umbrella, and the rain kind of falls under it. But it gives people a guideline of where we want to be as a district. Is it the be-all, end-all? Not necessarily, but it's a roadmap for us. And when George brought up the SWOT exercise, not everything was, rosy. There were a lot of things that came out to say, we need to do better, we need more supports, and this is how I feel. And it was difficult as an administrator, as a leader, to read some of the comments that were in that survey. But I think it helps us be better, and it helps us address some of the way people interpret, perceive, and the supports that are needed. And that's what was developed within this plan. Again, the stakeholders were heavily involved, the students were heavily involved, and in the past, back in 2014, I think, is when George and I were last involved in one, we didn't really include students. There was a lot of leadership, there were a few teachers involved, and it was brought out to, these are the areas that we want to move forward. We thought it was really, really important to get our stakeholders, our parents, and our students involved to where they want to see the district go in the next 5 years. Sorry, Nikki, I know you had
That's
something.
okay. I just wanted to piggyback on, because this is a 5-year strategic plan, we, and George alluded to, we plan to develop the action steps, and those will be 1-year focus, and we plan to bring those back to you by September, like what our action step for these 6 areas, these 6 objectives will be. So for year 1 of the 5-year, here's our action step for this year to address. So for example, student access is one of our objectives. So we plan to have an action step which will have a measurable outcome of where are we starting, where do we want to be toward that action step, toward that objective. So just wanted to piggyback on that we plan to develop the 1 year out of, and we've already called it the umbrella of this, so the 5-year, so that as things change, as Jeff said, things will change. 5 years is going to look different than now, but if we've created an action step for each year, then we'll account for that.
Okay, questions? Steve?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District 5-year strategic plan, 2023 through 2028, and inclusive of this wonderful brochure.
Second.
Okay, discussion, please. Dawn?
Thanks for all your work and time involved in your student participation. I spent a lot of time reading through it. I have one particular question or some feedback, in particular on page 6. I just noticed actually at the last section. This is under theory of action. And George, you alluded to the brochure, but the full strategic plan will be posted online too, right, for parents and community to see as well?
Yeah, this will also be, but what you're going to see in the brochure is what will be, I guess, more publicly handy.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So under theory of action, the second bullet point, increase the district and school teams' capacity to collaborate, learn, and design sustainable systems that positively transform learning in a fiscally responsible manner.
Right.
And so I'm keying in on that fiscally responsible piece. And then further down on the next page, the last bullet, enhance communication with member towns. It stresses the educational needs of Whitman-Hanson students, promotes consistent, fiscally sustainable resource allocation. So this plan is so important, right? And it's 5 years, and I'm glad that we're pointing this out. And I know that the town of Whitman has a strategic plan also. And Board of Selectmen member Sean Kane just recently spoke to their strategic plan and referencing back to it. So it is a document that's going to continue to be referenced back. And I certainly understand the importance of fiscally responsible, right? So we want to use the funds we have wisely. What concerns me is the terminology fiscally sustainable, and it doesn't need to be an answer tonight, but a definition of sustainability, and I even called Board of Selectmen to ask his interpretation of that, because I think some people think to sustain something is to simply maintain it. Right? So the current funding we have, right? Well, if our towns sustain that, then it stays where it is. However, that doesn't move us forward, right? So I want to be really careful that doesn't pigeonhole us, right? Well, you said fiscally sustainable, and we can only sustain X. I think, however, George and Nikki just alluded to action steps, right? So we haven't specifically identified action steps. So when I looked back at last 3 years, strategic plan, there's a couple highlights here because we specifically as a committee and identified administrative-wise, universal full-day kindergarten, related arts, middle school foreign language. So these were in here. We could point to it. We knew what direction we were going in. So the only thing that worries me about this is that there's no specific initiatives, but I think you kind of just covered that.
We're trying to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I would just like to finish up in regards to that early education piece. One of the items on the Whitman Town Strategic Plan, because they reference schools, was the early education and full-day kindergarten. So we know we implemented universal full-day kindergarten, but I do still want to keep an eye on early education and the preschool piece, because we know that the federal government, the state government, they are all dialed into this. There are grant funds available, there is talk of expansion, and there are working families in town who have a need. I see it on social media too. I see parents saying, I can't find a spot at a preschool. Can someone help me? So something always comes up. So I hope that while it's not specifically written in here, that we're keeping in mind that, and that's also includes enrollment, right? So we want to talk about our enrollment and having that available. And then tying into the communication piece, there was a lot in the strategic plan about open communication with the community. And I hope that we can have conversations with our licensed childcare providers in town, because there's actually 21 in Whitman and there's 8 in Hanson. And these are licensed daycares who are feeding into our system. These are our Whitman kids in town, but how does our district communicate with those child care centers, Head Start, and the well-known preschools, right, to talk about our district, what we do, so that when their families say, hey, how are the schools here? How's kindergarten? What have you heard about it? That we're involved in that sense of communication. So I know, I can't find it right now, but I know in the strategic plan it talks about outreach and communication. So I hope that that's a piece that we can take action on at some point in the future.
And if I could just follow up on the piece about the sustainable on the bottom of page 6. We went round and round. Layla was on the committee also about what does that mean. And basically the consensus was that this is the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District plan. Yes, there's outreach to the towns, but when we talk about fiscally responsible, fiscally sustainable, that doesn't mean the status quo. It's a lot like when you have the car and you know that you're going to keep your car, but that car you have to expend things to keep that car running at a proper space. You have to put the new roof on your house. So we tried to say that we don't want to be known as frivolous. We don't want to be known as extra, but we want to know that if we're entering into things that are going to impact the budget in a growth way of the budget, we have to make sure that we've done our homework, we have to make sure that what we're doing is proper, and we have to make sure that what are the steps for sustainability. And so that we tried to make it centric, that aspect centric to the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District. When it talks about the outreach to the towns and it talks about those pieces, which was a pillar in communication in the last strategic plan we had, that is then when we get into how do we work well with towns, and then how do we all collectively do it. But one is, here's our plan, it's solid, we did a solid job as a school committee, as educators, as this is what we need and what maybe the costs will be. And then the other phase of that is when it comes to the outreach aspect of that, with ourselves, to you, to the superintendent, and to the towns.
So, and this part of the strategic plan definitely came out of wanting to make sure that we're doing a good job communicating, I think, as George is saying, to the communities about, so in particular, curriculum. George and I have had the opportunity to share with the committee the progress that our students are making in the areas of curriculum, but we've had to commit financially to that curriculum program. And so part of this is what are our action steps to ensure sustainability with that in a fiscally responsible way. We're not gonna ask from the towns more than what is needed, but we are going to ask for what is needed that ensures sustainability. So that's that piece of it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes,
And just a little bit on that, like in the, I don't know what you want to call that first block under the theory of action. So the statement articulates how an organization will move from its current state to its desired future state. So that right there suggests that it's going to be more than what it currently is. But then when I read the language, and I totally understand why this language is in here, but I have concerns about where it could get us. I guess to John's point, like seeing the bulleted list of action items after, but when you're talking about a desired future state, in my interpretation of that, that would mean more. Like in our old strategic plan, we have related arts. We've tried for 3 years to get that in. It's not in, and it hasn't gotten in because it's a cost, right? And that would be part of a desired future state. But this year, it was not fiscally responsible to put it in, right? So I just am concerned about the ping pong of that. Like, this is our desired future state. This is what it's going to cost. Well, that's not fiscally responsible. Who's determining the fiscal responsibility? Right. Who's determining the fiscal sustainability, right? That's the concern. Is it us because it's our strategic plan?
So this plan was written, this plan is not a strategic plan of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District in conjunction with the town of Hanson and the town of Whitman. This is a strategic plan that says the responsibilities for growth and if, how, and when we need to move forward for the best interest of the students will lie with this group eventually. So this group is charged with being fiscally responsible and growth in order to retain our long-term success. So those pains and those things that happen have to be part of this collective group. And then it's the advocacy, the working together, and the collaboration to move forward from there.
This is dead. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
All right, any other questions? Yes, Brett.
The way I interpret this is our roadmap, these are our intentions. And this is stating what we want to do. It's all subject to times, conditions, etc.
Right. And that's where the action steps become important.
Okay. All right, then I guess we'll move to the vote. The motion on the table is to accept the strategic plan that was presented to us. Okay, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much.
folks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for your help.
If you don't mind me calling Chris Jones out of order.
Sure.
Dr. Jones, we're going to move you up.
Just in case we don't have enough time.
Right.
Because we are on time.
Yep. So, folks, there was nothing in your packet as far as this proposal by Chris. Chris has been away for a couple of weeks. He did a round trip around the country with his family, all over the West Coast, and he's back. He is looking at making a change to the delayed opening schedule and making them early release days. I had asked Chris to solicit his school council, solicit parents for input, and staff. He's provided you a handout. I know you haven't had a long time to read it, but that's why I brought him here, to explain how his process was, his rationale for making those changes. Just a little history of those delayed starts. When we did move to that early start time, I made the recommendation to the superintendent that at that point that I could use some professional development time that would not impact the time on learning for our students. We would always meet time on learning for the state, but give students an opportunity to sleep in a little bit. We would open the doors at 8 o'clock and give teachers some collaboration time, something that they didn't have during the course of the school day. I think Chris's proposal for 2023 shows you they're still going to have some collaboration time built into the schedule, and the reasons why he wants to make that modification from a delayed opening to an early release. So Chris, take it away.
Sure, thanks. You pretty much said all of it. Moving away from 16 delayed openings, we currently have 16 delayed openings throughout the course of the year. They're every other Thursday. They start in September and run till about April when we get into testing season, as it's so called, where we really can't afford to do that. My proposal is that we move to 8 early release days. Now, when I say early release, it's to not confuse it with the 10:15 a.m. early release that you typically see. It'd be a modified early release, and instead it would be at 11:40, because basically what we would be doing is taking the time from the delayed openings and combining them into 8 of those early releases. So students would be leaving at 11:40. Lunch would be served as it would be typically during the course of the day. But what that would do is, once a month, that would allow teachers to have 3 hours of uninterrupted time for curriculum work, for common planning, for professional development. One of the reasons that we thought about this is because if you've ever sat down to do some involved work, which many of you have, you get to that hour mark, and it's just about at that hour mark that you really begin to dig in and make some traction on what you're trying to get done on a larger project. So unfortunately, during these hours, what would happen is the teachers would come in, they'd start to work, they'd start to make some traction. Now they're starting to think about that first class that they've got to have going. Meanwhile, some students are starting to trickle into the hallways, more so now than before when the delayed openings were put in, which I'll touch base on that in a second. But then suddenly the teacher's thinking about, okay, I got to get to my first class, I got to pack this up, I've got to get over there, I got to meet kids there, I have to be at my classroom for the students. It's not very productive. So a way to be more productive is to give them this blocked time. And the reason I say it's 3 hours is because I've put it on the Wednesdays that we have staff meetings. So I don't impact after school clubs and activities, because on those Wednesdays that we have staff meetings, we don't run those anyways because the teachers are in the staff meetings. So when I said I'd reference back to the students coming into the hallways, what we're noticing is that more and more students are unable to take advantage of that delayed opening because, right, the elephant in the room is we've got an early start time anyways, and now those 16 days that students get to sleep in that extra hour, they're going to lose that. Well, in reality, that's an equity issue that we're noticing because more and more students aren't able to avail themselves of that extra hour. So now we're saying to the students, this group gets the extra hour, you don't. You can sit in the caf for an hour while we do our other business upstairs. This just seemed to be a very efficient way to do it and a very productive way to do it. It rolls right into our staff meetings, which I'm not big on staff meetings. I'd rather use meetings for professional development, deeper discussions, and so forth, which this will give us the time to do that. We'll be able to plan those out, meanwhile participating in the district professional development as an added bonus. So what I did was I spoke to the school council about it, put it in the school improvement plan. We put a survey out. The survey was out for a while. We took the results, and then I gave the results back to, I shared the results back to the school council. And I said, I want you to look at these results with a couple questions in mind. One is, what stands out to you? And then what questions come up for you after looking at how people responded? And then the 3 questions I always like to ask when you look at a set of data is, how does this data confirm what you're thinking about? How does it contradict what you're thinking about? And how does it complicate what you're thinking about? And so the school council looked through that, gave me their feedback. I looked at some of the comments as well as the results. And what you have in front of you is a very condensed version because I knew you weren't going to have a long time to look through something very lengthy and involved. So the overall results of the survey is that 68.8% of the people that responded, and we had parents and students responding to that, 68.8% said yes, they prefer the early release over the delayed opening. 24.8% said no, and I know this is hard to see because it's not in color. 1.3% is other, and that other was interesting. The person gave some other ideas. They didn't really answer yes or no. They may have leaned one way in the answer that they gave, but they gave some alternatives. Why don't you try this instead? And then 5.1% were no response. So the people didn't respond. They answered the survey, but in their response, they either went off and talked about something else about how students spend too much time in sports or something other except answering the questions. So I took that from the results we got, laid that out, and then, like I said, I asked the school council for their response. They're all in support of the move to early release, and these are just some of the answers that were repeated under those questions. So I took repetitive answers and put them down so you didn't have to read the same answer 5 or 6 times. Now, a couple of things that came up that complicated it, right, or contradicted it, because we always want to look at that. Is that time after school. So we have athletes that come to school, and so now what do they do between 11:40 and the time practice starts? What if they don't have a ride back and forth? So we were talking about something that we could do with utilizing our Captain's Council, where we could have different workshops on character, on team building, and so forth with these students, and maybe build in some type of study hall. Originally, the plan was that we were going to make that mandatory, but my school council gave me the feedback, as did some of the parents in the survey. Look, the athletes do enough, it shouldn't be mandatory. So clearly, moving forward with this, once we know that we're doing this, we can come up with an answer. There's no doubt in my mind that putting our heads together, we can come up with something productive for students to do that's beneficial to students that don't have the luxury of that ride back and forth. That number will change in size from season to season based on participation and the students who participate in different sports. The other piece that we came up with was, well, I have the after-school time, and that's pretty much the biggest thing. The other thing was the loss of the hour, and some of the answers that I received were addressed that, but that wasn't the question, because the way the answer addressed it was that, well, we're not in favor of this until you move the start time of the high school back. And I don't have any control of that, but what I do have some control over is what I can do with that time that we are in school. If we move the start time back next year, we can obviously adjust that. We're looking at our schedule in the coming year through a committee based on some other things that we're going to be putting in place for students.
Okay. Chris, I have one statement before I go to other questions. I had heard that, and you can answer if it's true or not, that you saw more tardiness on the late starts than normal. Is that true? So,
egregiously so.
Egregiously so. More tardiness. So
I actually made announcements to the school that we were going to have to look at delayed openings and how we handled delayed openings because of how bad the tardies were on delayed openings.
Okay. All right, thank you. I just wanted that to come up. Yes, Fred?
3 questions. One, because I'm a data nut sometimes. Total number of respondents, and if you have the data between students and parents.
158, and I can break out the data between the students and parents. The survey was...
Amounts. Of the 158, how many were students or how many were parents?
I wouldn't want to guess because I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
Any consideration to a hybrid? In other words, doing the early release and also throwing in a few later days?
Those were two of the others that I received, as far as, can we do something half and half? Can we, and one of the other suggestions was, can we put the 2 hours in the morning instead of in the afternoon and just go to school at a later time?
Okay.
So yes, short answer, yes.
Okay, and just going to ask it because I have to ask, any impact to transportation or budget?
No, that was actually one of the wins of this, is that when I went and asked transportation, it wouldn't be an impact which is why we can't do the later or take 2 hours in the morning, because it would impact transportation. But now when we do it this way, the buses are free after their run for the other schools to take the kids back. So every student that needs
It's also a result of full day K.
Yeah.
Not running those buses during the day, which we draw from that time.
Okay.
So the window does work.
It's just a run instead of the afternoon run, they do it at 11:15.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Steve?
The other concern is with those late day starts is all the high school administration is at the task of checking everyone in and whatever the process is.
Directing traffic.
I mean, I know just coming in from a medical appointment into high school and, you stand in line, there's 3 or 4. If there's more than 3 or 4 kids, it can be a pretty big thing. It's stressful. You want to get to class now, but I can see a lot in that. I'd propose, do you mind if I make the motion to approve the early release high school proposal? It says discussion, but I'm going to say proposal. The new high school release early new proposal.
Okay, do I have a second for discussion?
I
Okay.
have one. This is district-wide or just for the high school?
Just the high school.
Okay, all right.
Okay, who else? Hillary?
I'm trying to pull up next year's calendar, but there are already half-days scheduled. So these are, so have you, okay, so 5. So chances are you're not going to have 2 in 1 week.
I will not, I checked and I moved them away from that.
Okay.
And to clarify, there are more than 5 half-days. We have 5 professional half-days. We have grading days that are half-days as well.
And then grading days are on
Right.
Fridays.
So, but nothing will be
So-
concurrent on that same week.
So my
No,
only-
I laid out the calendar, and
Okay.
the first Wednesday of every month are faculty meetings.
Okay, so that was when it would be. These would be.
Correct. And if for some reason one falls, I'll just adjust it.
So I don't know what kind of press you've done, but my only suggestion, and I think because my kids are younger, they're half days all the time, right? So explaining that these are not new half days, they were just, what you just, like they're flipping it. Because if you don't have kids at the high school, you don't know that you guys did that
Right.
late start. And so I think that some parents might see that and be like, oh my gosh, kids are never in school. It's always half days, right?
I'm not too shy about advertising, so
No,
as
you're
soon as
not.
I get the yes, I will.
Yeah. So
I love a YouTube video of it.
that would be nice. And
Very good friend.
the only other thing I would add,
Fred's
and
on.
I think you touched on this too, but when I first read this, like making something mandatory for the athletes or for any students, like you had said at the beginning, you did it on Wednesdays when you had faculty meetings because you weren't having other clubs and activities meet, but you were going to make these kids meet as a club. You said you backtracked on that and said
Right.
you weren't going to do it anymore. I just think I know, the kids who might want to go home and take a nap before their practice or things like that, right? So just that flexibility, I think, would be important and go a long way.
That was the feedback I received, and I'm looking at a way with a number of people, and the leadership team will be looking at that, is how we make that work so that students do have an area they can go to if they need to, that's still structured, so it's not a free-for-all after school, but they have something that's productive that they can do.
David, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Jones, I think this is a great idea, and I think it's going to have an immediate positive impact on student achievement. What I think of right away is, when I was 18, senior at the high school, and we had our delayed openings, particularly in the wintertime, I think it can be a very chaotic time period where you only usually have 1 or 2 staff members at the door, and you have students going in and out. You don't know if they're running to the bathroom or if they're going around the hallways. I think it's very chaotic for for the staff to keep up. I think with the students in the cafeteria that do have to come in because they can't get a ride for the delayed opening, or they're going to have to walk if they miss the bus, and now it's the winter time and they don't want to be out in the cold walking to school. I think it's very tiring in the cafeteria. I think students are typically holding their heads, trying to stay awake, and I don't think there's a lot of productivity going on at that point in time. And I can't speak of the professional development standpoint, but I imagine it would be better off later on in the afternoon, especially where teachers are now in the groove of things after teaching a couple classes, the mindset's going, maybe they're thinking more of things they can improve upon and discussions they want to bring up to their peers. So I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'm glad you did that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I propose we had a 29th day in February next year. I think that would help you out. And David, sorry, that was our budget cut. That's why when you were 18.
Dawn?
So overall, 3 hours PD each month. So does this give the staff more professional development, more opportunity for a good reason? I mean, in that sense, over prior years? Like, are we able to enhance the time that staff has?
Yes, we'll be able to enhance the time with curriculum revisions, with professional development on everything from culturally responsive teaching to dealing with electronics in the classroom. What we'll do is we'll come up with a calendar that we're going to go through with the staff, and some of it will be staff teaching other staff, some of it will be administrators leading it, but there will be better professional development than an hour every other Thursday.
That's great. Thank you for doing that. And I agree, it's quite a disadvantage for students who don't have the luxury of a ride in the morning to take the benefit of that hour, even they're tardy too. So I don't like the idea where we had 2 groups of students experiencing something different with that late start. On the same note, though, I do recognize that 25% of the students said they like to sleep. Now, I think that phrasing is that, they appreciated the benefit of that rest, They felt probably more rested to come to school. So I hope in the future we can look at that population of students and see how we can support them as well in that reason. But overall, thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move to the vote. Okay, all in favor of this plan? And it's unanimous.
Thanks,
Go
Chris.
right ahead.
Thank you very much.
Chris.
You're welcome,
Well
Chris.
done.
Okay, you're up.
Thanks.
You're up.
So, in your packet, on your drive, you have the school improvement plans that every principal has to submit every year for a vote. Obviously, I don't have them here today. I thought you could look at that. If there were any questions specific, we could still vote the plans, and I could bring them back in August when they're here for those specific questions. But I'm just looking for, and you can vote them all together, or in an elementary block, middle block, or high school block as their school improvement plans.
Motion to accept the school improvement plans as presented in our drives.
Second.
Any questions? Dawn?
So I'm going to actually refer back to our strategic plan now in relation to school improvement plans that we just approved. On page 10, it mentions under Objective 4, Community and Culture, the creation and distribution of a plan to highlight student work, including, not limited to, exhibits at parent nights, publicity in the newspaper, use of district and school websites, and inclusion of such a plan in the district and school improvement plans. So do we know, and this relates to a multifaceted plan that ensures opportunities to share student growth, work, and success in a way that is accessible and meaningful for all. So is that something we're striving towards including in the school improvement plans, or is that in the plans that we're looking at tonight?
That's something we'd be striving to do because we had a timing issue, obviously, because the plans are due every year. By the school improvement plans are due every year according to DESE, and this plan wasn't adopted yet.
Okay.
So we sort of said, hey, look at what we have, but it's going to be what we're striving for after that.
Okay, it just caught my eye, so I said, okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Improvement plan and
Yep.
strategic, all right, thank you.
Any other question? Okay, move to vote. All in favor? Okay, unanimous.
Thank you. Briefly, school choice, I know we've talked about it. What I have currently coming into the district, we have 30 kids returning for school choice, and I have 4 new students enrolled or saying that they're coming here. They've applied. 1 new 6th grader, 3 new 9th graders coming into the district. So that would be 34 at this point in time. I don't know if all are going to come back. We will know once we hit September. But that number is down, and that means revenues will be down moving forward. So we are still recovering from that loss of a couple of years. And I don't know what's going to be coming again. And usually our school choice numbers balloon up a little bit once people move and they request to come back, because students move in and out of district all the time, and we keep them there. But Beth had asked her those numbers. As of right now, I'm looking at 30 returners with 4 new. And I know Dr. Jones had told me he was still getting some students asking if we were open. I know he actually said he had 2 students moving into another town that were originally from here but live in North Carolina, and if we were still open, and we are. So we still might have some jump on that. But we have 34 projected for our October 1 enrollment.
Thank you.
John, business.
Thank you. Good evening. There are 5 documents in the drive, and I'll just hold them up if you don't have the drive. The first update is document 1. It's the cherry sheet comparison between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. It was every meeting I've been trying to talk about where the state budget is, and nothing's changed since our last meeting. The state budget is still at conference committee as of 6 o'clock. Tonight, so nothing's changed. There's really no update on that, unless okay.
It's in conference committee.
That's where we are. So, and just for everyone can remember, we have to have a budget to the towns for assessments 45 days before town meeting, which I think this year was March 16th or March 15th, 17th, something.
Right around there. Yep.
And here we are, July 19th, and we still don't have a state budget to know what our state budget is. So we're going with a number, and we won't know what the final number is, and we still don't know what the final number is 4 months later. So that's just an update on that. Document number 2 is a preliminary general fund revenue report through June. Looks like this, if you're a paper person. So this is where the fiscal year 23 budget versus the fiscal year 23 actuals. There's one number on there that's highlighted in yellow that I haven't reconciled yet. Those are miscellaneous revenues. We have to go through and find out what every single revenue is for the year, and then appropriately put it in the right spot. And we're doing it by hand, so it takes a while. So that without that number, the other numbers are solid. And if you just are going to go over them very quickly, because I know we've got some things to do, but Chapter 70, we got $103,260 more than what our budget was. And that's because we had gone with the governor's budget in fiscal year 23, and subsequent last year they added, I think in subsequent budgets, either the House or the Senate, they gave more. So it's not like we got more than we were budgeted. It's just that when we had to make our budget last March of 22, that was the number that we went with. So we ended up with $103,000 there. Same thing with charter school reimbursement, the next one down. Those are all state aid related. Chapter 71 transportation, that's regional transportation reimbursement. You can see that's down $366,000 from the budget, and a little bit further down you can see that they ended up giving 79.55% of the eligible amount that I submitted on the end of the year report. That was significantly down for what we thought it was going to be. Homeless transportation reimbursement, sometimes called McKinney-Vento, that was also down. That was 54.91% of what I submitted on the FY22 end of the year report. On a good side, interest income is much higher than budgeted. Interest rates have come back. I've been talking to the treasurer about that. That is way up, and it's up a lot over last year's budget. So that's up by $200,000. So overall, right now, taking miscellaneous revenue at that small number, but it's probably going to be a little bit bigger, but not much. We have about $108,000 over budget for revenues in fiscal year 23 as of right now.
Question on this page, Fred? Yes.
On the regional transportation, where the Commonwealth had allowed a higher percentage, and I understand it's of what you submitted. Mm-hmm. I know we changed our methodology of submission for FY23, or did we do it for FY22?
This has the new method in it.
And they didn't accept it?
They accepted it. They gave us more than they normally would under the old one, but they didn't. They funded it at 79.55 of the new methodology number.
They didn't do 95%.
They did not.
Because that's what was in the budget, was that 90-something%.
Right, and that's not what's coming out. It's coming out at 79% right now.
I mean, I would like to see us, the district, send a letter to both of our state reps, and just go over that fact and see if they can look into it, if they have any.
It's the same thing with
that's a good amount of money.
Same thing with homeless. Homeless is down.
Yeah.
I mean, we projected.
And that's federal. McKinney-Vento.
Correct. So we're down. And that's...
So both of them.
Therein lies that question we were talking a little bit before the meeting around that we put forth a budget in March that's approved in May, and we get these numbers in June and July, after July 1st, and need to work on these numbers right now. And that's that difficulty with a regional school district budget that relies so heavily on the state.
But also, if we go with the governor's, usually the governor's budget is more conservative than anything that does get passed, so it ends up being safe that way. But do you need a motion or a consensus?
No.
For what, to send a letter? No, I'll send something out. Nope, I'll send something. I'll draft something. Not a problem.
Don?
Yeah, on the regional transportation, so you're saying of our expenses that we submitted to be reimbursed, we got reimbursed 79.5%.
Yes, out of the expenses that were
Right.
reimbursable.
But the percentage for all regional school transportation is legislative, so other regional schools probably received more. So Yeah, my question would be, which expenses that we submitted didn't come across as qualified expenses to be reimbursed? That's what it sounds like to me, because it is, passed within the state budget that regional schools will receive X reimbursement. So maybe it was 85%, I forget. But if we didn't get that as a regional school district, then that tells me some of those expenses weren't considered eligible for reimbursement by the department that reviews that. So that would be my question for us to review what expenses.
Is that the DOI?
That's, if I may, Chair, that's my request.
Okay,
And
right?
that goes back to my first question. I thought you had said of what we submitted as eligible.
It's eligible for
Right,
reimbursement.
and they didn't question the eligibility.
No, they didn't.
So they just arbitrarily cut our amounts. That's why I think we need to, voice a very strong opinion. And add Senator Brady to that.
I will, for 3.
As well. Because that's just flat out wrong. And it was up over 90%, if I remember correctly.
95,
Unless there's
I
a
think it was.
residual payment still coming, is there any way to ask
That
that?
could
Like,
be, I
where's
don't
the
know.
remainder of the payment? That's what.
Glenn,
Do they give a reason why it wasn't what we requested? They just say,
here's what you get.
This is the
Really?
cherry,
That's
this
nice.
is the cherry sheet that comes out in July.
okay.
Actually,
So they could say 0 if they
much
felt like
to
it.
John's dismay, because it came to us July 5th when it was due. We were
I
supposed
guess,
to get it
yeah.
July 1st.
Yeah.
So target dates and things like that. But I'll write the letter to...
But no explanation.
And that's the fluctuation around regional transportation. This is a number that we saw 10 years ago when it was 64% reimbursable, which is supposed to be 100% reimbursable,
That's right.
subject to appropriation.
Yep.
So to me, it looks like the appropriation was
Makes it
79%.
very hard to build a
Yeah,
budget.
but legislature passed a
Very
95%
hard.
reimbursement, or if that's,
An
I know it was
accurate
90 something.
I think it was 95 for
last
some
year.
reason. Yeah.
Last year.
Right, so it goes, so for FY23, and these are FY23 numbers, that's what we should be receiving, because they're always a year behind fiscally
So
on
we'll-
reimbursement for transportation.
One more question.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, Glenn.
Is there an appeal?
Well, that's what.
Yeah,
We don't agree?
He's going to write a letter.
Okay, but that's just a letter of protest. Like,
Well,
is there a
no.
formal appeal? We don't agree.
So John, go ahead.
We're going to write the letter.
I'll write the letter.
That's it. So but they could ignore the letter, correct?
Well, no, it's going to be to our state reps and our state senators.
Asking why.
They're going to now put Desi on the hot seat.
Will
and
they do
say
that?
why. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can't speak for them.
Yes, I'm just saying
but
they're under no
knowing them,
obligation to actually do it.
I'm sure that they will.
We're at the will of others, unfortunately.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So are we saying that other regional school districts received the 95% whatever reimbursement, but we only received 79? Or do we know that Silver Lake received 79% and so did we? Or did they receive, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know what other regional schools.
Is there a way of knowing?
Yes,
Yeah, we
it's
can-
on.
It's all on.
The website is updated through 21, 22, and 23 aren't on there.
Right, FY22 is not on here. This is this year, but, I'm sorry, this is FY21.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it lists all the regional schools, and they were all reimbursed at 96.21%. It has all the amounts, so
Then we
every
vote.
regional school district gets the same percentage,
That's
yeah.
not this.
No, it's not, as John just
So,
said.
okay, so that's my
FY22.
question. So it's not like they pick and
across the board.
choose
No.
unless you have unreimbursable, is that even the
Okay,
word?
let's keep one
Right?
person at a
Yep.
time.
Sorry. But that's my question. That's my clarification. So there is a chance that
Ineligible.
there are things ineligible or they are, I don't know, could they have
they're not.
been misled and like, sorry, you just get 79%, everybody? Like, could that
Questioning the
also happen?
methodology.
Yeah, it depends on the appropriation too. If they're not appropriating as much money for regional transportation,
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
But if it was legislative.
Yeah,
I know.
and that's what we'll dig
That's
into.
what-
But
that's what we'll get
I
into.
can say this with confidence, John submitted everything appropriately for reimbursables. There are nothing that was a non-reimbursable item.
Right.
So we have to dig into that. We were surprised, like you, 2 weeks ago when this came forward to say, because we were expecting at least 90. We were expecting at least 90. So this was a shock. But my assumption, again, is that this is regional. Now, I was at the superintendent's conference last week. There weren't a lot of regional superintendents that I spoke to, especially local. But when I mentioned this to our locals, they don't understand regional, because kids pay for transportation. So we'll dig into it and try to find out. And I have a subgroup that I can reach out to through our regional, through Mars, just that group, to see what they experience. So I'll write the letter to our three, ask a clarifying question, and we can actually go up the chain to the Associate Commissioner to see if this is across the board or not.
Maybe we CC the commissioner with the letter too.
Sounds good. Okay, you can continue. Tom.
Next document looks like this. It's related to the Hanson HVAC bond, bond anticipation note. So the treasurer had a sale on July 5th of the bond anticipation note that's only paid for by Hanson as part of the capital assessment. The amount was $377,622. It's dated for Friday, when actually will change hands. We had 3 bidders down the bottom, and the winning bid was by Oppenheimer and Company at 5% with a $400 premium. And if you want me to bore you, I can explain what that means. But we have to take the lowest bidder, and they were the lowest bidder. So, I don't know if you remember, rates were extremely low 2 years ago. They are not now. They are high and getting higher. And we have to think about bonding in the future. I think I said that at our last meeting, but there was another bond anticipation note only paid for by Hanson that matures in June. So there's one June, one July, and this is the one that was in July.
Okay, Fred?
At the 5%, they were actually the highest bidder, but I see reoffer at 3.5.
Reoffer the column to pay attention to on this is NIC, which is net interest cost.
Okay.
That's who wins.
Okay.
And because they bid at 5%, but they gave us money up front of $400. The net interest cost of those two amounts is 4.89. So that's how they won.
Okay. Thank you.
In the budget subcommittee, I think Mr. Forth and Mr. Boyce were talking about that a little bit, about what would happen in a hypothetical Whitman Middle School bonding. I don't know if you remember that, but
Right.
I do.
Yes.
But so yeah, do you remember? I'm losing my mind, right? Okay. We did talk about it. Okay. Next document is capital projects. It looks like this. It has gold and green on it. So this is the list of all the capital projects for the district. The first group is Whitman, the second group is Hanson, and then the third group is high school related. And then I just color-coded where we are. At the last meeting, I said I'd go through them and I'd update it as we go along. These are not, the things that aren't in color-coded are not final yet. So if you look at a project, I'm just going to pick one. In Whitman, it says new kindergarten playground. It says we still have $184,000. That is not necessarily the case. I just haven't got to it and pulled every single bill and figured out. I haven't got to those yet. The ones that are shaded, I have gotten to. Hopefully, I'll get these all done by our next meeting, probably whenever our next meeting is in August. But the ones that are in gold, in my view, are done. They've been done for a while. They've been old projects that's just been kind of hanging around, and they should be turned back to the towns, in my view. The ones that are in green are relatively new, but they've just been closed. I'm going to pick one that says chairlift on Whitman. It's in green. It's W2002. There's $42,000 left there. We hired a company back in 2020 in order to assess the chairlift at the Duval School. It ended up being much more expensive than we thought. We still need a chairlift at the Duval School, but we're just not going to do that project anymore. The vendor said that they won't honor the contract anymore. The project is completed. we may have to come back later when we do an overall assessment of all the capital project needs of the district, and that may still be on there. But this money, it was set aside for that specific purpose, and it's not going to be used for that.
So can we hold on to that until we have the new assessment of need, or do we have to return it back to the town?
We were going to make the recommendation to turn it back and then do
I'm making
another
the
assessment.
recommendation to turn it back, and then if we need it again, we can ask for it.
Oh, okay.
But
Just to clarify, we don't have that money. That
We don't
money
have
is-
any money. These are just
All we have is the money encumbered by the town of Whitman.
Right.
So by us turning it back, they would be able to unencumber that.
Correct.
And
That's
take it off their books.
Right.
Yes.
Steve?
But we did spend $2,645.
Yes.
Was that like administrative costs or something?
We hired someone to come out and give us an estimate.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you remember, that was sort of the bane of our existence for a while because everything dealt with the age of the lift that's in the stairs. It's kind of like a 3-step stair, and the state kept denying us the ability to. They said an occupancy was not in order because we didn't have the lift. So what we had to do was get a company out to give us what it is that they could do. The result would be is that they had to regrade basically the first floor of the Duval School, and it just wasn't economically feasible. And there were no parts in order to do it because of the age and then the width that it would take for the gradient. So after talking to Ernie, this was a few years ago, after talking to Ernie and deciding at this point in time we could not move forward. However, we did have the study that basically said it's a hot mess, and that was the price of that.
Okay.
And
Go ahead, Fred.
also, just to elaborate for the public, the space needed for the run, I think it's 1 inch per foot.
Right.
You would be going so far down the hall, you may not even have enough room in that hallway to put a lift in.
Both the length of the hall and the width of the hall in today's standards of what was needed for an elevator to meet the ADA compliance would have meant that we were knocking things down to go into classrooms to try to accommodate this. So that was the report basically that we had to pay for.
Gotcha.
Dawn?
Question on high school, the road replacement, 200,000. Nope, sorry. Further down. Roadway, 300,000. Faculty parking lot repave. So it looks like we might just be missing an amount in a column because the amount left is 73,000. Would that be right?
Yes, so I thank you for pointing that out. That there should be an amount paid in there, but it's not completed yet, and it's not completed in the sense it's not completed in the sense that it's not completed out there. It's not completed in the sense that I haven't pulled every single bill by hand and totaled it up. So you're correct. It should say 73, and there should be an amount paid in there. That's just a
And I
linking
don't
it.
mean to say that I'm pointing out a mistake. That's not my reason for asking. But I did want to understand the process. And so when town meeting approves these funds, the towns are not giving us the money. I think we just talked about that. So the towns still have those funds. And once we complete the project, do we also send the invoice which shows proof of, services, if you will, to the town, so they know that, obviously the road, you can see it, but if it was computer or something within the school that the towns can't see, it validates that we have, completed this work. So
Yeah, I send every invoice and every check to the towns when I ask for the money to get reimbursed.
And then the towns
Then they
then pay
reimburse.
us for that, yeah. So my one follow-up to, hoping that once this is in Munis, right, then you won't have to be so labor-intensive in updating spreadsheets.
In
So
the
do we know
old
when that will
Munis
be?
system, everything was lumped into one account. The way I've got the new coding going in Munis, every single one of these articles is going to have their own account.
Oh, good.
So it'll be very easy to just point it and put it right in the right spot, right in the, right from the get-go. And I won't have to go sifting through a large amount of accounts in order to try to find out where they should go.
And then the invoices will be tied to each warrant article, if you will, that's approved at town meeting or each project. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, Ray.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, in the month of June, I believe, there were invoices sent to both towns. Approximate how much?
Oh, boy. Hundreds of thousands?
I'm sorry?
200,000? 300,000?
I heard it was like, that's why I'm asking you, I heard it was over $1 million. Per town?
It wasn't $1 million, no.
Okay.
It was hundreds of thousands, 300,000 or so. There's probably $1 million of charges that I haven't got to.
Okay.
All included.
Okay. And did the towns fund us before July 1st?
No, they didn't.
They didn't.
But that's okay. We talked about this at the last meeting. We won't be hit for E&D as long as we get the money before September 30th. So I need to finish billing the rest of these by the end
So
of
if we
the
get it before September 30th, it'll be able to be certified into the FY23 E&D?
It'll be if we get the money before September 30th, these accounts will not be in a deficit, and then a deficit won't be hit against our E&D.
Okay. So but we've already paid that money out?
Yes.
And we paid it out of operating funds?
If you're talking about cash,
Yeah.
we took it out of the general cash.
General cash.
If you're talking about what account they should have come out of, they came out of the capital project account for this article. So that article...
Well, that goes back to the town, and the town then writes us the check out of
That's how
that.
I'll make it whole, yes.
So theoretically, if we have $1 million coming back, that's $1 million that should get certified into the following year's E&D, or you just put it back into cash?
$1 million will come in as cash, but the $1 million will be charged to the deficits in the capital projects fund, which add up to about $1 million, so that they'll match. So remember, E&D is just the general fund. These are all capital project funds, and they...
Right. And the way my mind thinks is if you spent money, now you're getting the money back. And if it ends up being in the account, then it ends up being certified as E&D. That's the way my mind works. You just deposit into a different account.
The $1 million doesn't go into E&D.
It goes from which it came.
It'll cut from where it came, and it won't cause us to be hit for $1 million off our E&D
Because
it's a deficit. Okay. Helpful?
Yeah. Now, well, follow up to that. The outstanding invoices span over a few years.
That I haven't billed yet?
Yeah.
No, they're only since the crash.
I'm sorry?
Since the data breach.
Okay, so it doesn't encompass anything from prior to the crash?
No, other than the Whitman mold.
Okay. All right.
Middle school mold.
All right, thanks.
I've got the phone page here. Are you going to that?
If you want me to.
Oh.
Okay, that just, what
I have it as the last page, so.
Number 5?
It should be this one.
Yep, John, go ahead.
I mean, the second one.
Just very quickly on the capital projects down below there, it just has totals. And then the total being unencumbered in Whitman would be 169,000 as of right now, 169, and then in Hanson would be 139. So the total amounts released and unencumbered on the town side is 308,000. And again, there will be more. I just haven't been able to get through the ones that aren't shaded.
The goal with the capital projects is to keep them current, and as soon as the project's done is to close the account so that it unencumbers the money for the towns that have been in the bank. When John came on board, he found accounts from 2001 that had money encumbered in both towns for projects that were here before George or I were even employees.
Yes.
So his goal was to clean those out, and we're almost there, correct? We're almost there.
Yes. And then the last document was just a breakdown of the phone system. It's on here in several places because it was several articles. The phone system is complete. And this is kind of trying to encapsulate every bill that we paid and every line item that was used, every budget for both towns. And just, when we're ready to go, I'll have more about, capital project, but it is done. And this is one that we spent, we had $353,598 set aside to do the project. We're going to end up spending $299,550.52. So we're going to be returning back to the towns $54,047.48. So this is a good story. It was well done and all around by everyone that was involved. That's it.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
The only other piece was the E&D
Yeah.
Fred's piece.
So is that,
So there was an agenda item, Mr. Small brought up the fact about using excess and deficiency. We all have talked a little bit about OPEB before, so Fred, this
Yep.
is your piece, so.
Sure. My thought is where, for us to get to the end of the year, to spend any money and put it into our OPEB liability, which is probably creeping up to 100 million right about now.
Right.
It's,
Go ahead, John, if you want to have
you know,
answer that question.
it becomes scary to say, all right, let's take $100,000 out of our operating budget. We have better things to do with the $100,000 or $58,000 for your robotics program. It's so worthwhile. But if we could commit to a policy of, say, 10% of new certified E&D. So if they certify $100,000 for E&D for next year to go into our account, and if we have the policy of 10%, then that would mean $10,000 would go into our account toward our OPEB liability. We have 200 and some odd thousand, I believe, in that account right now. It's an investment account that the school committee voted years back. So this would give us a consistent amount that we would be placing toward our outstanding OPEB liability. It would look good to bond makers, might get us a better bond rate in the future. I know that's one thing that they do look at when they're coming up with our bond rating. And the better our bond rating, the better interest rates we will get. So I feel it just would make strong financial sense without handcuffing ourselves to just be able to take that small portion of new money that gets certified. And if there's no money, then you can't do anything with it. If there's a lot of money, then you're doing a lot more. But, you know, in general, I don't think it's going to be a windfall, but at least it'll be something and it'll be consistent. So I would like to make the motion that we declare 10% of our new E&D funds that are certified on an annual basis to be given toward our outstanding OPEB liability.
do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right, discussion, please. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Chair. So I know from a budget subcommittee standpoint, we've kind of discussed this the last few fiscal years, and one of our takeaways, and John, feel free to step up if you disagree with this. You know, when it came to our bond rating, I remember it had to have been July of 2020 when our bond rating went down. And part of that was our low investment towards OPEB and our low balance pertaining towards E&D. So, you know, one of my first takeaways hearing this is, in essence, we are robbing Peter to pay Paul because we need to have a sufficient E&D balance, and we also need to be making a healthy contribution towards OPEB at the same time in order to make sure our rating is as high as possible to save us on interest costs in the long term. So I think that's something we need to consider. And I also like to, you know, reiterate, I truly believe this is a purview of the budget subcommittee, something for us to discuss. I know last year we talked about a reserve fund, John, and what those contributions could go to, whether it's E&D, an emergency occurs, OPEB investment. Those are discussions that we're having. We haven't met as a budget subcommittee yet. We haven't had the opportunity to reorganize with our new group, and I think it would be great if we had that opportunity to have those discussions, work it out, provide a recommendation, send it to the full school committee so then they can make a determination at the will of the school committee. But I just personally don't think this is, and again, it's just one opinion, I don't find it fiscally sound because, like I said, in the long term, I do believe it will hurt our bond rating, which will hurt our ability to be fiscally sound when it comes to the middle school project and the interest rates that come with that. And we don't know if interest rates are going to continue to go up. From my understanding, what I hear in my employer, it does seem like there's an opportunity or another essence where interest rates could continue to go up. So we don't know, and I think it's something we should consider for the long term.
Dawn?
I like the idea of investing into the OPEB liability, but I like what you said, Mr. Forth, about recognizing the E&D balance. So I think one should happen with an understanding of perhaps also setting a threshold for our E&D balance. And that's a conversation for another day, I think, of what that should be and what we should maintain. We know that by law, we can maintain as a regional school district 5% of our operating budget. So if we are now at 60 million, 5%, 10% would be 6 million, 5% is 3 million. So we have a few $100,000. We could ideally even set 3 million as our E&D threshold, our balance, and anything over that, we invest in OPEB. Take us a while to get there, but something to think about as a basis.
Steve?
We need to dedicate or rededicate a line item to this. That's what we do with Pilgrim Area Collaborative. Yes, we do set a set amount every year. I do, in a sense, like this idea, but hearing this play out, I think one of the things is that you never know what 10% is until you get to that year. And if it's set as a policy, does it automatically happen? Should be determined by a vote every year still. But it needs to be built in to the regular budget. It is part of what we do as service here. Just like anything, resources, services, insurances, whatever the case may be. And I don't know, I can't, out of all the lines, I'm not recalling, David might know better, but what had we done for that maybe even over the past 3 years and using a dedicated line for that?
Have we put anything in, David? Do you know? For OPEB?
For OPEB, to my understanding, we have not made any investments in OPEB. I know we've talked about it the last 2 fiscal years on budget subcommittee, but there's been a lot of discussion. I know last year, like I mentioned prior, we talked about a reserve fund and how that could work as a policy and how it could be utilized. I know, to John's point, John, correct me if I'm wrong here, the beauty to the reserve fund would be during this time period where E&D hasn't been certified yet, because it's not October, so then we could use whatever's available of the reserve fund during that kind of time period where everything's kind of in motion and we don't have a set certification yet. So that could be to our own benefit. Something I do want to mention too, we did it last year, and then we also had a rough draft document the previous fiscal year. Every time the budget subcommittee reorganized, we present a scope document, and I like to highlight in yellow the changes that we've made, and I highlight in red what we removed. Something we could do if the will of the committee wanted this to be within our purview, and I'd have to refresh the scope document to see what we have from last fiscal year, we can make it a goal to come up with a plan for investments towards OPEB and also for a healthy investment towards E&D with the long-term goal of increasing our bond rating to save us money on interest rates and help us when we take that out for the new middle school project.
Okay. John, can we hear from you, please?
I was just doing the quick math here. So as of June 30th, in our OPEB trust, we have I'm going to round the numbers off, $273,000. Our OPEB liability from the last valuation is $133,900,000. Sorry, just it looks like 0.2%.
Okay.
Again, I did quickly do that.
John, what's your opinion about this? I'd like your opinion too.
It's always good to fund huge liabilities any way you possibly can, but if other things are priorities, then this is why what's happened in the past is
we've had a problem with that.
there's just not enough money to go around. It's I know that with Standard & Poor's, who would probably be rating our next bond, if Whitman Middle School was going to pass. They're looking for some sort of written policy of how to fund it and how to reduce the liability. And they're also looking for, and I don't know how we could do that here, I've been racking my brain, is some sort of dedicated funding source. Like in a town, you just decide, you've never had meals tax before and you decide to implement meals tax. You put meals tax towards OPEB, I just made that up. But there's a policy in place to take a funding source, and so they know that there's always something going towards it. And again, with this amount of disparity between the what we have and what our liability is, it's going to take a long climb. And then They also look for things where we have a plan in place to examine the liabilities. Again, it sounds simple, but things like, do we go through every year and assess the people who are getting the benefits from the district? Do we pull everybody's name and make sure that there's someone who should be getting it? I mean, it sounds simple, sounds like we should be doing it, but are we doing stuff like that? That's what they would like to see in some sort of comprehensive document that from my past lives, they've asked for. I don't think things have changed much. And, things like wage growth assumptions, things like that are usually down the list. So those are the main things they're looking for. If the policy, if we had a policy in place, and if the goal is to try to get a bond rating, we have to do the things that, increases our bond rating. If that's not a goal, then we don't do those things. I don't know if that helped, but depending on what the goal is, we can try to achieve it.
Right.
And just to stay there.
Okay.
If we dedicated a percentage of what would essentially be new money coming in, which is the E&D, is that a risk in doing that? Yes, because we're dedicating a small percentage and we're creating that policy. We're showing the commitment. Do you think that does any harm?
In general, they like again, rating agencies want to see larger reserves over smaller. So if we're taking a reserve and we're taking a slice out of that reserve, I don't think that's helpful. I think they like to see, here's something new that isn't in the mix anywhere. Let's take that and put it towards it.
But we're not, it's coming in, we're identifying it, and then it doesn't get into the mix, so to speak.
I would say that anything's better than the current situation. So if that was, it gets, it's sorry.
We're looking at 2 interest rate increases in the foreseeable future from the Fed, quarter of a point each. They may back off, they may not, but that's pretty much what we're looking at.
Yeah.
They backed off for a little bit. The good thing is, depending upon the interest and depending upon how our OPEB fund is being invested, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. If you have it in some mutual funds or money markets, and these guys are the professionals, you're going to be taking advantage, of that upswing of interest.
Can I just make a suggestion? I would like to see, David, you said that the budget subcommittee hasn't met. I think, so this was my 3rd budget, and every year we've taken money out of E&D to supplement the budget. I'm a visual person. I love the graphs and the charts and the things that we get from John. So for me to commit to saying, yes, we're going to take this money, like how much did we take out of E&D this year to supplement the budget?
600,000.
600,000. And then that left us with like
500,000.
Right. Right.
Yes.
So I think it'd be a suggestion that I have would be to charge the budget subcommittee with coming up with, here are trends from E&D for the last few years. Here's how much that went in. Here's how much we took out to supplement the budget. And then here's what we had left, because I think, Stephen, you said it, 10%, we don't know what that's going to be. And for me, that's difficult. I understand we need to do this and for all of the reasons why, but until I can actually see the numbers, I'm struggling to accept it.
All right. Well, we have a motion on the table that was seconded. Okay, that Fred wanted 10% taken out. So let's vote on that, and then we can see where the vote goes. Okay? So all those in favor of Fred's motion of the 10% of the E&D every year?
Can I abstain from that? Because I really don't, like Hillary said, I'm not sure what my answer would be.
You can abstain from any vote.
Yeah, you can abstain from any vote if you want to. Okay? And vote. Go ahead. Fred, one. And against? And abstaining? Two abstain. Yes.
Okay.
Vote for.
Okay,
Again.
motion doesn't pass.
Okay. Now, so the motion didn't pass, but I think this is something that we definitely need to look into. Along with that, I need somebody from Hanson to be on the budget committee. Right now, we have 3 members from Whitman, and I think, If not for anything else, but for visualization, we need to have somebody from Hanson on the budget committee.
How often do you meet?
It varies. It varies.
Once a month.
It's once
Once a month at first, and then during budget season.
And it's just,
We've had 4 times in March.
I'll absolutely do it. It's just timing with work. You know, I work till 7 most Wednesday's the only night that I don't work late.
Well, a lot of times you meet before Wednesday.
So,
5:30.
yeah, I mean, we've done a couple of things. We've been,
5 or 5:30 meeting,
yeah, so,
Maybe,
if it was a Wednesday.
if it was a Wednesday. So if you met Wednesday before school committee.
Actually, in some Thursdays, and I could
well,
occasionally Thursdays.
I'll just talk to what we've done in the past. I mean,
It's flexible.
we have a different subcommittee group for the first time since everything kind of came to fruition. I know in the past, we've met as early as 9 a.m. during a school day.
Sign me up.
That's not something we always do, but it's been done in the past.
Yes.
And we've met, 6:30, and
We got Glenn.
I'm in.
all right.
All right, we got Glenn. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you
Nice
very
to
much.
meet you. Stan?
We're going to keep adding you to committees.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn, for doing that.
You just have norms if you want to grab
Okay.
norms or pass over to the next meeting.
I have a degree in finance too, but you would never know it.
Surplus.
We have this. Okay, we're going to skip the norms for a minute. We're going to go to declaring a surplus for the elementary books.
Motion to accept, but I do have one comment. And I offer
Good, I'm glad you got this out.
an apology, and the reason for the comment is the document in the drive says surplus, books, comma, George. I don't want a surplus, George. I would rather we keep them.
That's it.
Okay, George, we're not surplusing you. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, sure. So what happened is we have the iReady program at the elementary school. We're going into its last year. However, when we signed that contract, they said if they updated their program, they would then send us new materials at no cost. That was in the contract. So what they did was they have some new things in it, one of them being culturally responsive practices. So there's 800 boxes pretty much right over there. These are consumables. So technically, traditionally in the past, we don't bring consumables, workbooks, yearly workbooks. We don't bring these to school committee. However, there's a large amount that will be gotten rid of, that we will have to discard. So I wanted you to make sure you're all aware, you're accepting of it in case there's a picture that gets sent, to Fred, or there's something that gets sent to Steve, that this is all on the up and up because it's no cost to the district. They're providing us with new materials, but I wanted to make you aware.
You don't want the dumpster picture?
No, I'm good.
We got
I've seen
those
enough of
already.
those.
We had those.
Yeah.
And we don't want you in the dumpster with us.
I don't mind. It's all right.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Are they recyclable?
No, they're just like newspaper. They're kind of like newspaper print pullouts. Yeah.
Motion to declare.
We already
have it.
Oh.
Motion and a second.
Has it been seconded?
I don't think it was David.
That's second.
Oh, David
Okay,
second. Oh,
let's
okay.
vote.
All right, all in favor of the surplus?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to save your life.
Okay, so we have 2 choices now. We can start working on our norms tonight, or we can put it off until the August. David?
Chair, it's 8:34 right now. We're missing 2 of our members. I really would like to hear what Michelle and Scriven have to say. I
Yeah.
appreciate if we could wait till next meeting, dedicate
Yes, we
some
can.
time, and I think, maybe decompress after, at times it's a little contentious today, but I
Yeah.
appreciate if we could go and have that
Absolutely.
discussion.
That's why I offered it up.
I agree. Plus,
Great.
Chris kind of had.
Yeah, well,
He's our
yeah.
culture guy. We need him.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we'll put that on. So that's the next thing,
Okay.
next meeting in August, as far as date. We haven't got to set a date.
We haven't
and-
set a date?
We do
No,
have a
we
date.
haven't. We do have a date. Did we say?
It's August, sorry about this. Let me just check it. It is August 16th.
16th, I thought it was the 16th. Okay,
Excuse
so
me, it's,
now you're confusing me.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get my calendar, it's not scrolling up. It is, school committee meeting is on the 23rd,
Oh, not till the 23rd?
Wednesday, the 23rd.
Okay.
I have staff coming in that week.
Will it be a 6 or a
It'll be
6:30?
at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock?
And then next meeting, we're going to discuss about meeting time.
Okay.
In August, so it'll be one of the discussions about
All right.
meeting start times. Yes.
I'm on vacation that week, so
Okay.
do you want me just to email them?
Yeah, if you could email them to me.
Sure.
Please. Because then we'll, combine them and see what we have in common. Hopefully, we have a lot of in common. I don't want a list of 20, I don't want this big, huge board across here. We want to condense and let's make sense of them. okay, in August. And we have some other new things coming on in August, but, okay,
And you'll
so,
get an invite from me for the 24th, August 24th at 9. We'll do our district tour, starting at
9 a.m.?
9 a.m.
okay, so if those of you who are new, you are welcome to, we usually meet here at 9, and we start with the high school, and we do a tour of the buildings to see what shape they're in. We go in your own transportation from building to building.
Just us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
School committee,
Well,
Yep,
yep.
yep, and
Okay.
we go from building to building and learn about what's going on to see what looks good.
What date is that, Beth? I'm sorry.
The 24th.
It's going to be the
That's the
24th at
24th
9.
Of August.
Of August.
Yes.
That's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
What time?
Thursday.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
AM or
9
PM?
a.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
9 a.m. here.
And we would meet here?
We'll meet here at the high school, and you'll get something from me, just to
okay.
say,
As a
hey, look,
reminder.
here's a reminder, you know.
Could I ask both of you explanation of the words norm again? You both responded to my emails. They were just a little
Sure.
Good.
different,
So-
but
so
together
I-
they're probably more.
Okay, so a norm is how you are acting, how we act during a meeting, how you present things. In other words, you know, a norm could be respectful to others' opinions.
Decorum.
Yeah, it's all kind of decorum things, you know, how, different things like that, you know, what do you think people should act, you know, besides respect, what other, listen carefully, you know, have an open mind.
Things that are expected of
Yes.
Yes.
committee members.
Yes,
Correct.
and it will be on a poster board that before that. Most organizations have that, that just to remind yourself of, to respect, you know, if we all had the same opinion, we don't need a school committee. Okay? So we need different opinions. That's, again, we need to listen to everybody because you need to have an open mind. You might change your mind listening. Glenn has said that before. He has changed his mind just by listening to conversations. So, you know, we just want to be thinking of things like that. And, you know, we'll probably all come up with, kind of a lot of the same things, which is fine.
Okay.
Okay?
Sure. Acceptable behaviors.
Yes.
things
Yes,
like that.
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
We can close the meeting, go to executive.
yep.
No
So
votes
we're
will be
going to
taken.
close this open part of the meeting. We're going into executive session. No vote will be taken. As per Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21. A1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. So we need a roll
Motion
call.
to go into executive session.
Second.
Okay, I need a roll call vote, please. Steve?
Yes.
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Yes.
And David?
Yes.
And Hillary?
Yes.
Fred?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
And we'll only come, when we come back out,
Yeah.
only vote we'll take is motion to adjourn.
Right, I said there were no
Sorry
votes
about that.
taken. I did wait, I didn't see.